Disclaimer. The contents of Studio 151 podcast do not represent the views and beliefs of the TU Media Lab or the University of Tulsa.
Welcome to the BallsTalkSports NFL podcast. And look, I know we say this every episode, but today is very special. It's our Predictive Mock 1.0. Victor, I don't think you can get any more NFL draft than that. How are we feeling today?
You know what? We're feeling great. We did our own What We Would Do mock draft a couple of weeks ago. Just got released, but now this is a predictive mock. It's a whole different animal. I'm feeling good, though. We're going to get down to the nitty-gritty of what we think will actually happen in the draft. Now, we've spent the last week scouring for basically every report that we could find. So every nook and cranny in the NFL draft rumor world, whether it be from the biggest sources or the smallest team blogs, I guarantee you at least one of us has seen it. So we're going to give you our best guess as to what's going to happen April 24th. Man, it's less than a month away. I'm already too excited to wait.
It's starting to get late in the process. Really, the only dominoes left to fall are a few more of the pro days. But it still doesn't feel like we have a great grasp on who the true first-round talents in this year's class are. It's very deep. It's very much a lot of guys with top 50 grades, so potentially a lot of GM preferences coming out, a lot of scheme fits. I'm really excited.
Yeah, I honestly don't think we will have an idea on who the true ones are by the time the draft comes around because everybody's going to be different. You know, my board is going to be very different from your board. I mean, I'm going to have true ones that you don't. Right? I mean, we did our top 10 edge rushers recently, and we differed there. Everybody differs a little bit in every draft, but this one specifically is going to be one of the highest variance drafts when it comes to how teams think of different players.
It's making me excited. So without further ado, Victor, are we ready to get kinky?
Absolutely. Let's do it. First predictive mock draft of the season.
All right, so do you want number one overall?
I thought you were going to do odds.
Okay.
Or wait, no, I'm doing it. Never mind. All right, so I probably should have remembered that. Yeah, no, I appear to be doing odds.
Well, we can both pick for any number. We're versatile like
this
that.
We're the every down player.
Correct.
You know? We're a hybrid. We're not a tweener. We're a hybrid. We can do it at any position, really. I'll pick for odds. You'll pick for evens, but it's not really like a what we would do mock draft where I make the pick, then you make the pick. It's kind of like the way we were talking about earlier. It's going to be like, okay, for odds picks, I'm going to be in the GM chair, but you're going to be in the assistant GM chair. So I can talk to you if I'm not really sure about something. You tell me what you've heard. I'll tell you what I heard, and we come to a collaborative decision. But I do have the final say, and for evens, you will have the final say.
It's going to be a war room.
Absolutely. This is inside look at GM's minds because, as you all know, we are real ball knowers, and we're going to be, GMs one day, obviously, if not tomorrow. Now, obviously, we already had the offers from the Bears earlier this season. We, of course, had to decline them. We're holding out for a better job, so it'll be awkward to pick for the Bears. But yeah,
this is going to open things up. This is our interview, you could say.
Absolutely. I mean, we know a lot of. Surely, all 32 teams are listening to this, looking to get insight into what the other teams are doing. This is the most hotly anticipated mock draft of the season. So here it is. Get ready. It's going to be awesome.
Brian Gutekunst, I know you're hearing this. Please just take the good player. All right, number one overall, the Tennessee Titans. Do we have to talk this one out too much?
I think we do, because I think we'll probably arrive to the obvious pick, which seems to be Cam Ward to Tennessee at 1. But I'd like to talk this through because, I mean, we've heard consistently from the Titans that, well, first of all, they're not going to pass up on a generational player if a generational player is available, and they've also said that they do think there are generational players in this draft. They see that we've heard reports that they're narrowing down on Cam Ward. He's their favorite guy, and all of their offseason moves seems to suggest we're building for a quarterback, bolstering the offensive line, bringing back some receivers, getting the defense up. But we've also heard some trade discussions. We've heard that the Titans are open to trading number one overall away. So it makes sense that they could say, hey, we're going to take him. We're going to take Cam Ward unless, I don't know, you make us an offer we can't refuse and you want to jump us. And then you can get him. So it makes me think that maybe they're not fully enamored with Cam Ward. I do think they will take him if they don't get a super great offer, but I do think the right offer might blow them away here. So I don't know. I think this is tough, and it really comes down to I think if somebody were to trade up, I think it would be the Browns or the Giants. There is one team down the board after the Browns and the Giants that I've heard might want to trade up, that they are sniffing around and they're trying to be aggressive, and that's the Saints at 9. I've heard Kellen Moore and this in New Orleans are really looking up. They love Cam Ward and they're looking to get to number 1. I don't know if that'll happen. Do you think the Giants or the Browns would be in the market to make a move like that?
First of all, it so doesn't surprise me that you're hearing the Saints because Mickey Loomis loves to trade up in the draft. Now, I can't imagine that they have the capital. I mean, what, they're probably still holding on to all their future assets, but still, like, how many first-round picks are going to have to give to come up from 9 to 1? You know, even for a weaker number 1 overall pick in Cam Ward. So as fun as that would be, obviously we can't project that.
No.
The Giants and Browns are a little bit more interesting, and I think we'll get to their thought processes when we move on to 2 and 3, because ultimately I do think the most likely outcome is that the Titans take Cam Ward number 1. And the kicker for me is really they didn't bring in a quarterback. They brought in no competition for Will Levis, and I think what they're indicating is that there's no competition for Will Levis. Will Levis is their backup. Every year it feels like there are a couple teams where the consensus on them is just based on what we saw last year. We cannot go into the next season with the same guy at quarterback. It's not just bad for football, it's actively bad for business at that point. And with an opportunity to draft Cam Ward, who, again, even as, in my opinion, I think general NFL opinion, a weaker number 1 overall pick, you're hard-pressed to pass that opportunity up. The generational player comment really does throw me for a loop. Maybe they were just in a different point in their process because that was very early on. I mean, that was pre-pro day, that was pre-combine, that was pre-free agency. Maybe that was just NFL GM speak. Like, obviously, all 32 teams want to take generational talents with their first-round picks.
Especially if you're picking number 1.
Especially if you're picking number 1. And I'm sure that they would love to have Travis Hunter, but, you know, generational prospects feel like they come around 5 times a season with some of the discourse that we have, and you combine that with the fact that GMs can absolutely lie with their words. It tends to be their money that's more of the kicker. The Titans spent money on the offensive line. They didn't spend money at quarterback. Reports are that even though Cam Ward didn't have like an all-time Zach Wilson pro day, they did come away higher on him after that pro day. They've met with him a whole bunch of times. I feel like all the signs are pointing to Will Levis, even if it isn't Trevor Lawrence, give him the playbook in the offseason before drafting him territory. I think there's a pick that we have to make here.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm going to make the Cam Ward pick. There's no way. There is a way that it's not. Right now, it is the most likely thing. Pro day, I think the biggest thing was it looked easy for him to throw the ball down the field, hitting those 55, 60-yard markers. I mean, you saw there was one play, one rep, he run down the sideline, just lets it loose 65 yards, and it just looked easy. That's big. So I'm going to have the Titans taking Cam Ward. I think that's what they'll do, but I think if I had to put my money on anybody making this pick, if it wasn't the Titans, I think it would be the Giants, because they did just sign Russell Wilson. I don't think that changes anything. I think they are still looking like, if we can get Cam Ward, I think we should get him. I don't know how they feel about Shedeur Sanders, and I guess that kind of brings us to number 2. And obviously, both of us have been on the record being a little bit lower on Shedeur Sanders, whereas the NFL seems to not really be able to make up their minds, or are playing the media game, which is much more likely. There seems to be a lot of media games going on with Shedeur Sanders. I'm curious your take on what's going to happen with Shedeur and if he goes at number 2 here to the Browns.
So I think Abdul Carter has actually shifted. He's overtaken Shedeur to become the betting favorite for this pick. And look, I could absolutely see that because the NFL is consistently very high on Abdul Carter. Even if we're both a little bit lower on him, there's no question in my mind that the NFL loves this guy and views him as something close to a blue chip prospect.
Yeah.
You put him beside Myles Garrett, who draws more double teams than any edge rusher in the league. Name a better way to turn that into a potent force and accelerate his development track. That would be just a ferocious defensive line. That being said, I think taking Shedeur Sanders here just makes everything easier and more probable for the rest of the mock draft. And I don't think it's remotely far-fetched because it feels like these reports have quieted down, but the early intel we were hearing is that the NFL doesn't love Shedeur Sanders. Most teams don't have them as a top 10 pick on their board, but it only takes one. And the team that likes Shedeur was Cleveland. And wouldn't it just be such a Cleveland pick to take Shedeur number 2? Like, I hate to be that guy, but that feels like such a Cleveland thing to do. They were desperate for Deshaun Watson. That situation's been a disaster. Who's their starting QB right now? Kenny Pickett. They traded for him. He's still on the rookie deal, right? So they're not paying him a lot of money. I don't think that Kenny Pickett is going to stop you from taking a quarterback in the top 5 if that's the grade that you have on him. A lot of these reports that they like Shedeur Sanders, and another thing I heard is that Cleveland is not leaving the number 2 overall pick without a quarterback. That seemed very persistent early on in the process. These reports were coming from the same people who made one thing very clear. Myles Garrett, when we were all doing our Myles Garrett Trade Destination podcasts, was never getting out of the building. Absolutely, they could take Abdul Carter at 2, and our mock draft could be wrong already. But I think if you don't take him here, the landing spots get really cloudy, and this is where I'm comfortable with removing Shedeur Sanders from the board. Now give me your take.
Yeah, I think this is a toss-up for me. I could see it going either way. It really does sound like they are taking a quarterback, but I'll be honest, I haven't heard that the Browns are all that high on Sanders. I've heard they're plenty high on him. I don't know if it's enough. It's also like when you're playing the quarterback games at the top of the draft, especially not everybody plays the quarterback games even in 2021 when we all knew Trevor Lawrence was going number 1. It was like, oh, Zach Wilson might go number 1. No, of course not. Everybody knew it, but they still played the games. But now this is a quarterback class that Shedeur could fall out of the first round even. And it would be a shock, but
I think it's possible.
I think it's possible too. Jackson Dart could go in the top 10. Cam Ward could fall out of the top 5. I mean, I think that's the least likely out of all of those, Cam Ward falling out of the top 5, but you just never know. And with this quarterback class, that makes it a lot easier for you to just pump your information in and make everybody confused. So the Browns could be doing that. There's I don't know. We want to trade back with the Giants. We need talent. So I want the Giants to come up, make them believe we're going to take Shedeur Sanders. I know Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen are very desperate right now. They do not have a great roster. Only have a fine roster, but no quarterback. And this is their last year if things don't improve. And if Cam Ward goes number 1 in this, like he does in this scenario, you need Shedeur Sanders more than we do. Okay, you need Shedeur Sanders because Stefanski's getting at least one more year after this. I think he knows that, and I think Barry does too. You need Shedeur Sanders more than us, so you give us a pretty penny for him. We'll move back, and guess what? We end up with our number 1 player in the draft, Abdul Carter, anyway. I think that is a possibility. I also think it's a possibility that the Giants are just like, no, we're not going to give you that, and then the Browns stick and say, we're just going to take Abdul Carter. But I will also say I think Shedeur to the Browns is the most likely option. I like that pick. So it's a really weird situation. I think these first 3 picks are honestly some of the hardest to make.
All right, so I think we view this pretty similarly. Andrew Berry, the Browns GM, when they made that very aggressive non-consensus Baker Mayfield pick, I think he was something like the VP of player personnel, so he wasn't the GM. That's something to consider. I don't think it means that they're going to take Shedeur Sanders here, but when we get to the Giants at 3, again, in the top 5, I'm just so interested to hear your takes on these. I think having him off the board, it cleans things up a little bit. So I'm gonna pick Shedeur Sanders, and we're gonna see where our vision unfolds from here.
Yeah. So 2 quarterbacks at the top of the draft. If we were picking, I don't think that's what we'd do, but I definitely could see it happening.
It sounds right.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds right, but it also Shedeur at 2 just seems very high, but it's a possibility. So you never know. But the Giants, this is where stuff really gets insane because, I mean, New York's in an awful spot right now. Even if they can't take Cam Ward, period, I think they're in a really bad spot because I don't think Shedeur's their guy to save Daboll and Shane's job. I just don't think he's that guy. Out of all the landing spots, I actually prefer Tennessee the most for any quarterback, really. Cleveland number 2 and the Giants number 3 for Shedeur Sanders specifically. Sorry, not any quarterback, because that's my ranking of the offensive lines, and I think Shedeur needs a great offensive line if he's going to play year one. And the Giants need a guy to come in year one and save Daboll and Shane's job. John Mara made it very clear, this is your last chance. If we don't see a marked improvement from last year, you will be gone. So they bring in Russell Wilson, and that gives them the insurance. That's why I don't think they're going to take Jackson Dart here. I don't think that they have to take a quarterback here because they have Russell Wilson, and that's like, okay, we can go in. Russell Wilson won 10 games last year. Well, not really, but he was on the team that won 10 games. Give him Malik Neighbors, an okay offensive line. Andrew Thomas is coming back this year, of course. Maybe we can go 8-9 and save our jobs, maybe. So I don't think they'll go Dart. But they missed on Ward. They missed on Sanders. Who do they go? It feels like all we've heard about with the Giants this year are what's the quarterback they like? Are they going to trade up? Are they going to take Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders at 3 if they fall? So who do they like outside? Well, the 2 consensus top players in the draft, Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter, are both here. And while it may not be great for a guy trying to save his job, any other GM would be like, this is the optimal scenario. I get my pick of the best non-QB in the draft. I get to just take, if I think there's a generational player, I get to just take him. So if it wasn't a guy in there last year, I think they'd be ecstatic. Even then, I do think they will be happy about it. But I think this comes down to Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter, really. I don't think that there's any other players in play here. Do you think that they would consider anybody else?
No, I don't. I think it's quarterback here, whether that's a falling Shedeur Sanders or a Jackson Dart, or I think it's one of the 2 players that the league has made it pretty clear that they consider blue chip talents. I'm with you there.
Yeah. And I don't know. Let's take a look at the Giants roster real quick. When you're looking at the defensive line, you've got Brian Birds and you've got Kayvon Thibodeau. And normally I don't like the idea of drafting for need. But when you look at the Giants' draft history, they have a tendency to draft for need heavily. So they might have a higher grade than Abdul Carter. I have a higher grade on Travis Hunter than I do Abdul Carter, and I'm guessing there are plenty of teams in the league who are with me on that. I think if it's a tie, I think they go Travis Hunter just because, well, they need cornerback and receiver. And this way, like everybody's been saying, when Jameis throws a pick 6, Travis Hunter is the guy who can catch the ball or he can tackle on the return. So I think Travis Hunter here to the Giants makes the most sense if the quarterbacks are gone. But it's not a great situation if you're New York. You just got to hope that Russell Wilson's got some left in the tank.
I hear some people say that the Russell Wilson signing doesn't mean anything for them. And from a roster construction standpoint, where the Giants are right now, I completely disagree, because is Russell Wilson, pretty much washed at this point in his career? Yeah, probably. If they were authentically a contender, that would be they're signing him as a backup quarterback. However, this is a bad year for bridge QBs, and this is a bad year for drafting QBs in a draft spot like this. They were authentically desperate for Russell Wilson. That's why there was so much media coverage of it. I think that when Russ signed with the Giants, Jackson Dart's first-round futures fell off a cliff, because if Russ said, I'm going to wait for an injury on a playoff contender, man, their options are limited, because it's pretty clear that they wouldn't be getting Rodgers in that situation. And I think I would do the reactionary thing, and I would mock Jackson Dart here. But with them getting Russell Wilson, who, like it or not, should be, you project some more aggression, but still probably a top 32 quarterback, what's going to help you save your job more? Because they're not getting an extra year out of drafting a QB here. Like, a lot of the times, disappointing first or second season, you hit your house to a quarterback, and maybe it extends your window by a year. You get 2 years with him. It's very clear. No, this is your chance to right the ship. What's going to help you more? Drafting Jackson Dart here, so the difference between Russell Wilson and year 1 Jackson Dart coming out of that Ole Miss system, or taking a blue chip talent? Well, then you look at who are perceived as the blue chip talents. And you can either take Abdul Carter, who obviously the league likes a lot, but you have Brian Burns, who's a stud, and you have Kayvon Thibodeau, who disappointing, but he's a functional player. And I mean, Shane drafted him, right? He was the GM when drafting Thibodeau. Do you really want to go out tucking your tail between your legs and admitting that you messed up by taking Kayvon Thibodeau there? No, I think you go Travis Hunter, who has a higher impact potential than a guy who played two positions at an elite level in college. I think that they probably deploy him as a wide receiver. I think that's where the league is higher on him, and he will free up Neighbors for potentially a devastating year two breakout, while also being a really effective presence in his own right. Or they can make him a cornerback and work him into the lineup at wide receiver as well. The options are unlimited, and I think if there's a pick that's going to help them save their jobs, which ultimately I don't think they get done, but, we got to operate like we are Brian Daboll and Joe Shane. Travis Hunter is going to be a huge year one impact.
Absolutely. And another thing, this has never really been the team since Daniel Jones. They've never been the team to pull the trigger on quarterback. I mean, we remember in 2021, they traded 11. Pick 11. Justin Fields is still there. Daniel Jones doesn't look like he's the QB of the future at that point. This was before he took them to the playoffs the next year. And Shane he didn't pull the trigger. He trades back, which makes sense. He got 2 first-round picks from the Bears. I would have done the same thing. And they had the opportunity to draft Levis last year, or 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
2 years ago. And they didn't, which, again, probably makes sense, but they didn't. They've never been that team to pull the trigger on quarterbacks, at least in Shane's era with this team. So I think Hunter makes the most sense here. And that brings us to number 4 with the New England Patriots. Curious to see where you go here.
So Travis Hunter coming off the board at 3 is going to break up what quickly feels like it's becoming chalk, or at least chalk-y, which is Travis Hunter to the Patriots. I see that all the time. However, I do think that there's a pretty clear pick here.
Yeah.
You think of Tedoroa McMillan because the Patriots made some comments about wanting a big X receiver, but they just signed Stephon Diggs, and obviously they're not going to play the same role. But I also don't think that NFL front offices are quite as high on Tet as the media is. You think of Armand Membo, who's flying up draft boards, and the Patriots need offensive line help. But, man, I know that we're not factoring our bias into this, but I watched the tape on Armand Membo, and I say if a team spends a top 5 pick on him, like, holy hell, man. I see that as a pretty substantial reach. And also, I do think there's some legitimacy to these guys who are late risers. Yeah, where there's smoke, there's fire. They're rising. Teams are higher on them, and the media starts to come around on that. But then it feels like there tends to be an overcorrection window. Like, I think of J.C. Latham getting mocked to the Chargers last year. He didn't go to the Chargers at 5. They picked the better player, and they picked Joe Alt. However, he did go to the Titans at 7, which is earlier than a lot of people had him ranked. So I do think Membu is probably going to go top 10. It'll be interesting to see where he goes in this mock draft. But pretty much every Patriots beat that I've read up on suggests that if the board falls this way, they're going to take the best player. And that best player is Abdul Carter. Is it the biggest need on their roster? No, but this is how he's perceived. He's going to be easy to work into the lineup. Quickly, their defensive line, which was not the biggest weakness on their roster last year, but still a pretty substantial weakness, is going to be a strength. It's going to be one of the better units in the NFL, so that's where I'm looking at pick number 4.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it sounds like if Carter or Hunter are here, it sounds like they're expecting one of those 2 players to be here, and whichever one is there, they will take them. I think they prefer Hunter, but in this scenario, it's Carter, and I don't think they're mad about that at all. As it says, corner already kind of looks like a strength now when you acquired, I believe it was Carlton Davis, right? He went to the Patriots.
It was who? Carlton
Davis?
I thought he went to the NFC North somewhere, because obviously they've got Gonzalez as their number 1. Maybe it was Carlton Davis.
Because I know they got a corner.
No, I think Carlton Davis went to the Lions, didn't he?
He was from the Lions.
Oh, duh. Yeah. Who'd they replace him with? They replaced him with DJ Reed.
Yes,
I think Carlton Davis is a Patriot.
Yeah, he is.
Okay.
So, yeah, Carlton Davis goes to the Patriots. Now Gonzalez and Davis, that's a really nice duo. And Abdul Carter comes in to that front 7, and all of a sudden that defensive line looks really solid with Milton Williams, Kyrie's Tonga, Christian Barmore, they signed Harold Landry in free agency. You're looking really good there. And Keon White even. You're looking really good there. This is all of a sudden defense that last year, well, I wouldn't say the worst defense in the league, but
Bottom of the barrel.
Bottom five. Looking at average, maybe even with some good coaching, above average. That's a big jump for 1 year. So while I do think they're looking at O-line, if the board falls in a way like Shedeur slips a little bit and it goes Carter to the Browns and Hunter to the Giants, then I think they're looking at O-line, and I think it's between Campbell or Membu. I'd lead Membu, but in this situation, I think they go Carter. It seems like BPA, really, here.
All right, I'll go ahead and make that official. Now we have the Jags at number 5.
Well, it seems like the overwhelming favorite to go at this spot is Mason Graham from Michigan, and I can't see a reason they don't do that. It's the chalk pick, but it's the chalk pick for a reason. I mean, he's a very great player. They need interior defensive line help, and the big issues with him are like maybe he's slightly average arm length for a defensive lineman. He's a little small, but we're looking at the new Jags GM, James Gladstone, with Los Angeles. I mean, Los Angeles, if there's one thing they love to do, it's they love to draft small athletes on the defensive line. Braden Fisk, Kobe Turner, Byron Young. Jared Verse isn't small, but he's a heck of an athlete. They love to draft athletic defensive linemen, and they have a penchant for interior guys that are a little bit smaller and can wreak havoc, and Mason Graham is the definition of that. So I think not going to get too fancy with it. I considered Tet here, but I'm just going to go Mason Graham. I think that's – I don't think I felt this confident about any pick in the draft. I don't feel confident at all, but, other than one, this seems like the one that is most etched in stone.
I'm not going to lie. I don't think that in a class with average top-end strength, because, like, the top 5, the top 10 talents in this class, they're definitely weaker than average. I don't think you're looking at Mason Graham here, but in the world that we live in, to me, when I'm trying to get the Jags beat, it feels more like the question is who do they double dip on later to replace both their starting interior defensive linemen versus who are we taking at 5. It's pretty steady. I think they like Mason Graham a lot, and it's best not to overcomplicate this one.
All right. Mason Graham it is. That brings us to the Raiders at 6.
You said Mason Graham was one of the picks you felt most confident about. And look, it's not the same degree of confidence here, but there's a pick that's getting pretty chalky, and man, it just makes too much sense. It's Ashton Jeanty going to the Raiders at 6. I mean, you think of all the comparisons. Clearly, they're trying to win. They bring in Geno Smith. They want to do the competitive rebuild thing. So that's, a running back in the top 10 is a win-now pick, and I think they're okay with that. Ashton Jeanty is also one of who I would consider the few blue-chip prospects in this year's class. You can make a pretty strong case that Ashton Jeanty is the best overall football player at any one position in this class. And when there isn't a ton of certainty in the top 10, I want to make sure that that player comes off the board early because he's going to in real life, and we want to maximize accuracy. And then finally, they bring in Pete Carroll, and Pete Carroll had his Marshawn Lynch for an extended period of time. And look, I don't know if that's going to be my final comp on Ashton Jeanty, but as far as the contact balance and the running style, there are similarities there. I'm not going to overcomplicate this one either. Every NFL front office loves Ashton Jeanty, and I think it's overall very good development that we're seeing him rise up draft boards.
Yeah, I mean, the reports on him, everybody loves him, and it seems like that the football ability's there, and the football character seems to be better. It's every GM cannot stop talking about how much they want this guy in their locker room, how great a football character he has, and it's evident when he's on the field, just mowing guys down, stiff arms, as you said, the elite Marshawn Lynch-esque contact balance. Definitely makes sense that the Raiders would pick him here. I will say I'm not the biggest fan of taking running backs when you're in a rebuild this high. If I'm going to take a running back high, I think there's absolutely a place for it, but I want to be more a team kind of like the Falcons or the Lions were when they took Bijan and Gibbs a couple of years ago, a team that is ready to compete within the next couple of years. So when you're getting the most production out of your running backs, which is generally the first 4 to 5 years, that's your window, right? So I'd like to see that. I don't think the Raiders' window is the next 2 to 3 years, but maybe it is. Maybe they see it like that. I still think they probably take him though. Just it's an electric talent, and you need butts and seats in Allegiant, man, because that's also been a problem. He'll bring them. So the Pete Carroll connection makes a lot of sense. If it wasn't Ginty, which I agree it probably will be, if it wasn't, I think Armand Membu is in play here. I think Tyrone McMillan is in play here. Give Gino a big athletic talent on the outside, knows how to work after the catch. He loves those kinds of guys, so he could be his DK, even though I think Ted probably comes in the league and is already a better player than DK.
Oh, wow. I
think,
love it.
Well, I think Ted has a fantastic floor. I'm just slightly worried about his ceiling. But yeah, I think Ted is a fantastic player, and I think he'll be heavily in consideration. I think it's Ginty, Membu, or McMillan here. But I think Ginty is the favorite, and for good reason.
Their Super Bowl window isn't over the next 3 years, but I think they very much have that competitive rebuild playoff window, and no matter what happens, it's going to be a whole hell of a lot better than watching Zamir White.
Yeah, that's true. Anything to improve that running back position. And it also makes sense because they didn't do much in free agency to improve that. They brought in Raheem Mostert, a guy who's
like 33 years old.
Yeah, 33-year-old whose game is athleticism. It's still working for him, to be fair. Like, he's still, he had I think he was injured last year maybe, but year before that he had 19 touchdowns or 20, something like that.
He was explosive as all hell in 2023. He did fall off a little bit last year, which is just another indicator. Like, this is a team that projects as being pretty run forward. Yeah, I think they're looking at running back. Maybe they don't go Genti here. It's certainly possible. But in round 2, they're going running back early.
Yeah,
completely agree.
But I absolutely see Genti here. So that's the Raiders at 6. 7 for the Jets. This is a really weird pick.
I was split 2 ways on it, personally.
Split 2 ways, really. So I'm just going to mention this. It doesn't apply to this mock draft, but it sounds like, according to Jordan Reed, I don't remember what organization he's a part of, but he's a fantastic reporter. Very reliable. He says Shadur Sanders' floor is 7 to the Jets. He said he's not fallen past here, whether that's to be believed or not. As we just said, it's thinkable that Shadur falls out of the first round, but the Jets apparently do want quarterback. They want quarterback a lot, and let's look. I mean, I can't even remember. They got Fields. They got Fields, so they don't need to take quarterback this year. They absolutely don't need to, but apparently they are in the market here, and according to some reports, they have some love for Jackson Dart. So I think this is where the Jackson Dart window opens if no trades happen. I don't think I'm going to do it, but I thought I'd mention it. I think this is where the Dart window opens, and from here on out, don't be surprised if you see him, because as much as scouts everywhere will tell you he probably should not be going in the first round, and I think both of us will tell you he shouldn't be going in the first round, I'd put a lot of money that he will have his name called on April 24th, not the 25th, not the 26th. He'll be going in the first round, whether it be in the later picks, which we'll talk about teams that could potentially be fits, even if he goes in the next pick for some reason. We'll talk about teams that could be fits later. Or if it's early, even 3 of the Giants, I think he'll go in the first round. I don't think it'll be the Jets, but I don't know. Where do you think? Do you think this is where his window starts, or do you think his window starts at 3 with the Giants?
Oh, man. It's really hard for me to stomach Jackson Dart in the first round, especially that high. I do think his window starts at 3, because I could see the world where, oh, man, could I?
That's the tough part.
Could I see? I mean, what if the Giants trade up with the Titans, which is already highly unlikely, and the Giants get Cam Ward and the Browns take Shadur, and then the Titans take Dart? But no, because they made that whole generational player comment, and if that trade happens, I'm sure that they want their closest thing that they can get to a generational player. I can't see the Giants looking at Jackson Dart and saying, yes, this is our key to having more years as GM and head coach. I think this is where the Jackson Dart window starts. And even then, I do think we're in 2 different places with him. I think that Shadur Sanders is perceived as much more of a first-round lock, if not a top 10 pick, because, we've discussed how there seems to be a tier gap between Cam Ward and Shadur Sanders among NFL front offices. I do think that Jackson Dart is the pretty clear-cut QB3 over guys like Tyler Shuck and Will Howard, who's climbing a little bit, and Kyle McCord, who I think might go earlier than people expect. but I don't think he's viewed as a true first-round talent. I think that if we see, what was the draft where Brock Purdy was the only good QB? Was that 2021?
2022.
2022. I think that if we see a 2022-esque fall, or even like a Will Levis-esque fall to early day 2, I could very much see that being Jackson Dart. So I think it's around 50-50. But I would maybe say that I believe that it's more likely than not he doesn't go in round 1.
Interesting.
However, I could see the window starting here. It would surprise me because, like, new regime, I get that you want your QB, but, like, this is your first year. You're not expected to have a dominant season. Next year's QB class is supposed to be better, and you're making an identity around toughness and resetting the culture and doing things the right way. And look, on the field, Shadur is tough as hell. I mean, he is a very old-school quarterback, which I feel like a lot of people still don't fully understand, still kind of view him as a flashy runaround guy, which there are flashes of that, but that's certainly not his game overall. But off the field, he does bring some baggage that I think interferes with the culture that they want to set. Wait, why am I talking about Shadur to the Jets?
I don't know.
That was...
Well, because Shadur, I said Shadur's floor is 7.
Oh, yeah. So it's interesting to see that Shadur's floor is 7 comment coming out. Like, maybe teams view him as that top 10 type of talent, and so if a team that needs a QB is there, that they're willing to take a swing on him. It would surprise me that this new Jets regime is that desperate for a quarterback that they're going to take Jackson Dart here. Maybe they love him. Obviously, there's a lot of difference in how front offices evaluate quarterbacks. And so there will be big disparities in just how certain teams view him. Maybe they love Jackson Dart. That would be a very surprising move to me. I think that that's giving very mixed signals when they should just be trying to strengthen this team that already has a good roster as much as they possibly can. I think it's possible. I think it's highly unlikely.
Absolutely, I agree. I don't think it'll happen here. Just think that's the window, where the window starts. I do think Shadur, I wouldn't agree that his floor is here, but I do think that if he makes it here, I would be kind of surprised if the Jets don't pick him, because, as you said, he fits that football culture that they're developing on the field at least. And then off the field, yes, he brings some baggage. We got to remember, this is a Jets team. They play in New Jersey, but this is the New York media market, and man, they have had a history of drafting guys, and they can't survive in the media market. They kind of crumble under the pressure. If there's one thing you know about Shadur, he can survive in the media. He's been fending off media for 3 years now, and even before that, he's Deion's kid. He's dealt with it his entire life. He can survive the New York media circus and maybe even make it out better for it. So I think that might speak to Aaron Glenn and this Jets front office a little bit more than Jackson Dart.
Fortunately, we don't have to make that poison pill type of pick here because, let's be honest, we're not going Jackson Dart, right?
So, yeah, let's talk about the actual options here. You said it came down to 2 for you. This came down to 3 for me. I'd like to hear your 2.
My 2 are Armand Membu and Tyler Warren, who feels like he's becoming the sort of chalky pick, and that just makes a ton of sense because, for one, it's a big need in the passing offense. Well, Tyler Warren is a true inline tight end who can aid both the passing game and the run game. He's the type of tone setter that I think they're looking for, and it's just a major positional weakness. New regime. Did they fire their GM? They did, right?
Did they? Yeah. Yeah, they did. Yeah, no, because they brought in Darren Mogi, Broncos assistant GM.
Yes, I remember he was a Broncos guy, which, look, is it a big deal that the Broncos like tight ends and this is a potential Tyler Warren spot? Not really at all, in my opinion, but new GM. They passed on Brock Bowers last year. This was a popular Brock Bowers spot. And Olu-Fashanu had a pretty solid rookie season. I think you would rather have Brock Bowers. So there's a good opportunity to really set the tone there. But Armand Membu, their current starting right tackle, because Armand Membu was a right tackle at Mizzou, right?
Yes, he was.
Yes. Is Chukwuma Okorafor, who's making about $1.5 million a season. They brought him in just this past year, I believe. That's not starting right tackle money, and that could indicate that they're planning to get their guy in this spot. You start off the new regime by building the trenches. This is a player that I think front offices are higher on than we are. I could very much see this being kind of the good compromise with Armand Membou, where he goes top 10, but we don't have to go top 5 crazy with him yet.
Yeah. You look at this Jets offensive line. Man, from left tackle to right guard, this is one of the best offensive lines in football. I mean, legit, interior at least, Fashanu, you're hoping he takes a step up. If he does, this is from left tackle to right guard, one of the pound-for-pound best offensive lines in the draft. But John Simpson, I believe he made the Pro Bowl, and not for a bad reason at all. Joe Tippmann made a lot of strides this past year, and AVT looks better every single year. The right tackle, you draft Membou here, that's set it and forget it. This is a great offensive line for years to come. Just having 2 franchise tackles, that cannot be overstated how awesome that would be for this team, and it's enticing as hell. Warren also makes sense here. The name that I had that you didn't is Ted McMillan. I think he's absolutely in play for them here. I've heard they liked him a lot. I am, with your blessing, going to go Armand Membou. I just think that's the most likely pick. I think that's what Aaron Glenn does, because I think that's what Moogie does as well. The Broncos, they like those athletic offensive linemen as well. And they like the development guys. I mean, drafted Garrett Bowles 2018. Not that I don't believe he was there, but I think Membou's the pick here. It's becoming chalk that Warren's the pick, but we're seeing Membou a little bit more. I think they just go offensive line, set it and forget it, and go for one of the tight ends down the board.
To be clear, I don't think you're remotely crazy that Ted McMillan is in play here. I feel like Ted McMillan has a huge range of outcomes.
Yeah.
But I took one look at that pick, and I said, really? Justin Fields' second read? Oh, I feel like we can do better here.
Yeah.
But, I could absolutely see that. That's not crazy at all. All right, now the Panthers at 8. And, oh, man, this is where it feels like it starts to get tough. Based on everything I've read up on the Panthers, I don't think that this is a Ted McMillan spot. I mean, like, their entire receiving core is kind of big-bodied type of dude, so he doesn't really fit that role.
But is there any of these guys in that receiving core that you think is on the team in 2 years?
Jalen Coker, Xavier Legette.
But if Jalen Coker's not like a big-bodied, he's not your X.
He's
not your franchise
he's
X.
not your X.
He is a big. He can be the big-body contested catch guy. He's not your franchise X.
I agree, and Adam Thielen is not going to be on the team in 2 years, and he would make a great mentor for Ted. However,
I loved Legette, but the likely range of outcomes is not looking too good for him.
Legette was fine for a rookie at pick number 32.
Sorry.
He showed flashes. He had some production.
Sure.
And we all knew he was going to. He dropped way too many footballs. I agree with you on that. I know he's an older prospect, but there weren't aspects of his tape that were raw. I feel like you were always going to give Legette 2 or 3 years. I think they could. I just think that when we're trying to make the most accurate picks, that is one I kind of had to overlook.
That's fair.
I went with Jalen Walker as my number 1, and it's really tough because it doesn't feel like, for what is a very good edge class, we have clear edge rankings. I could authentically see anyone from Jalen Walker to Mike Green to Shamar Stewart to, well, maybe James Pierce. I think James Pierce slides a little bit, but we'll get into that. I could see any of those guys being the first edge rusher off the board. And when you're the Panthers, and even after bringing in some pretty solid names in free agency, you still have needs all over the defense. Why not split the difference a little bit and go with a guy who played both off ball and on the edge for Georgia? Also just a major tone setter, just a culture guy on the defensive end who's going to bring the play speed and intelligence that defense needs. And then lastly, I don't see this being Jalen Walker's best fit, but I know that Daniel Jeremiah, whose opinion I do respect, suggests that Jalen Walker could be an early down Mike and then kick out to, wide 9, 7 tech on pass rush downs. Again, I think you stick him at one spot and just let him get good at something, and I would prefer that it be rushing the passer. But they do need linebacker help, and I could certainly see that. So that's why I went with Jalen Walker. I think Will Johnson would be a pretty good fit for Ejiro Evero's defense as well. But, man, if you have a beat on what the Panthers are going to do and you feel like there's a prospect they like, I want to know your opinion.
I don't know, man. I don't think there's anything that I feel like they'd love. I think it's just, man, let's just take the highest-rated defensive lineman on our board. And I had 4 names written down. Jalen Walker was one of them. The other 3 were Mikael Williams, Shamar Stewart, and Walter Nolan. Walter Nolan's there because, man, they went after Milton Williams hard in free agency, just missed out on him. They went with Bobby Brown instead, and that is not a Milton Williams replacement.
And they got Tershawn Wharton, didn't they? Didn't they pay him like a lot of money?
They did get Tershawn Wharton.
I mean, you want Walter
yeah.
Nolan to be better than Tershawn Wharton is, to be fair.
Ideally, yes. So I think that's a possibility. I think this is where his range begins. But I think Jalen Walker makes a whole lot of sense here. As you said, Jeremiah decided to play off ball early downs, throw him in the wide 9 on later downs, and I like that here. He can learn from Josie Jewell in the interior linebacker position. He's a fantastic mental guy. And you know what? I've watched a lot of Josie Jewell over the years as a Broncos fan, and they're not similar players, Jalen Walker and him, as far as athleticism and stuff goes. But there are some mannerisms that just really, I can see it, and that I'm looking at Josie Jewell, look at Jalen Walker's like there are some similarities, and I think Josie Jewell can coach some of that stuff in him. We talked a little bit about him in the Edge episode, how he's a little bit of traffic cone coverage, how he's a step late to pretty much every read. I think those are what Josie Jewell excels at, finding work, finding the guys underneath, and being ready for anything to happen. So I think that would be a really fun place to go, and if you go Jalen Walker, I'm fully supportive of the pick.
And lastly, even if we don't get all the team fits correct, I do like to get the range approximately correct, and it does feel like even if you're, I think, authentically a little bit lower on Jalen Walker, even though you do like him a lot, I have a true first on him, and I still feel like front offices are ahead of where I'm at, which is interesting because the fact is that for an edge rusher, which I think is his best fit, he's a size outlier. All the indicators are this is a guy that GMs love. I do think that this is where his range starts, and I think he goes near the top of that range, so I like taking him off the board early.
Jalen Walker's a weird player for both of us because I think you're higher on him as an edge rusher, and I think I'm higher on him as a linebacker.
I had a third to a fourth on him as a linebacker, but I'm kind of lower on drafting linebackers in general. I see him as a guy who can be coached into a very, very solid run stuffer and a player who, because I think he's a really smart guy, can probably become an adequate zone defender. I didn't see the elite sideline-to-sideline athleticism with him. I think he's much quicker than he is fast, which is a good thing on the edge, a little bit less so at linebacker, but very much draftable at both positions.
Yeah, no, I have a 2-3 on him as a linebacker purely. I think I've only done like 5 or 6 linebackers so far, but he's 3 just behind Campbell and Paul.
I think I have him 3 behind Campbell and Schlesinger right now. So overall, I don't think we're too far off on him. Now we got the the Saints at 9. And oh my gosh, when I've been working on my mock drafts, I feel like I have no beat on what the Saints are going to do. They could go a lot of directions. It's your turn to take a crack at it.
Yeah, they can go a lot of directions. It's between 2 for me here because Dart, again, may be in play. I'm not going to go that route here, I don't think. I think if there's a team desperate for a quarterback, it may be the Saints, though. Kellen Moore, I think he was hired with the idea that if it works out, great, but if it doesn't, we've got a fall guy in 2 to 3 years. I think that was legitimately a big part of why Kellen Moore was hired. He seems like a very safe play. So this Saints team, in order for Kellen Moore to work out, might be looking to take a swing on a Jackson Dart here. I'm not going to have it happen. I just think, again, this is another potential Jackson Dart spot. For me, it's between 2 guys, Tyler Warren and Mikael Williams. They seem to be enamored with Mikael Williams, and Tyler Warren is an incredibly popular pick here. And I am leaning Warren just because I think they need another receiving threat desperately. And not only do they need another receiving threat, I think they need another guy. I think they need a guy that can just work the middle of the field. I love Olave. And he is good at working the middle of the field, but with how often he's been getting injured, and Kellen Moore is not going to call an offense giving Chris Olave a bunch of crossers, especially with Derek Carr running the starting quarterback position, a guy known for the hospital ball. We're just not going to be sending Olave in a lot of crossers, but if there's somebody who can take a hit in this class, it's Tyler Warren. So Warren absolutely makes a lot of sense here. Just a guy who can catch the football, can open over the middle of the field, run that dig, run that crosser, run that shallow crosser, which Kellen Moore loves, and a popular Tyler Warren pro comp is Dallas Goedert. Kellen Moore just came from working a lot with Dallas Goedert in the Super Bowl run. He clearly figured out a very, very nice way to use him. He ran those shallow crossers a lot with Goedert. And again, an inline blocker. We know Kellen Moore loves a tight end that can block and leak. I think it just makes too much sense here to pass.
Does it mean anything to you that they just brought Juwan Johnson back for
No.
3 years, $30 million?
It doesn't.
Okay. All right. That's fair enough. Another interesting thing I considered here is how they're pivoting to Brandon Staley's system. Prefers his edge rusher standing up, but I don't think that dissuades them from taking a Mykel Williams because he can play both ways to me. I am perfectly comfortable with Mykel Williams as a stand-up edge or stick his hand in the dirt. He can be multiple. You love that. I'm just fine with Tyler Warren here.
Yeah, and that's the thing. If you're drafting Mykel Williams, as much as we kind of shit on Georgia for playing with 4-eye, you can play him with 4-eye.
You can.
You just can. He's good at it. Like rundowns, if you're playing the 3-4, you can throw him in as a base 3-4 defensive end. You can just do that, and then you're running nickel, then you throw him on the edge.
And it opens up the stunting and penetrating game as well.
Which he's really good at.
You can do so many different things with Mykel Williams, and it seems like he's fading down boards a little bit. We'll see where we draft him.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to believe that NFL front offices don't like him quite a lot.
Yeah. I think I'm going to go Tyler Warren here. Just makes too much sense, but I would not be shocked at all if it's Mykel Williams.
Okay, and now I have the Bears at 10. And if Ashton Genty was here, this would be the Ashton Genty spot. Ashton Genty is not here. And I prefer that he was, because I think they would pull the trigger on that. And predicting what Ryan Poles is going to do is not particularly easy. But it did come down to two players for me.
Mm-hmm.
The offensive line feels like it's a little bit of a catch-22, because they've shown that they're willing to deploy a lot of resources there. They replaced the entire offensive interior. And so it's natural to ask, okay, is Braxton Jones next on the chopping block? But then on the other hand, they just spent a bunch of money on the offensive line, and now you're comfortably 5 strong. I mean, you could still use a depth guy, a 6th, a 7th. You can never have too many good offensive linemen, but the fact is, like, moving on from Braxton Jones and making him a swing tackle is, like, really a luxury pick. I don't love drafting for need, but I think that you have to factor in need to an extent, and that's why my number 1 pick here, like the guy that I would prefer, is Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M, hyper athletic. I know that they signed Dayo Odeyingbo, and their skill sets aren't entirely dissimilar. You can reduce Dayo inside on pass rush downs. They're both versatile, but Shamar Stewart is just an entirely different sort of athlete. And Ryan Poles' draft history suggests that he really places a premium on athleticism. The other guy is Will Campbell, who has a 9.88 RAS score. What are your thoughts?
I think that makes a lot of sense. The Will Campbell, it's something that I thought about, but man, I think the Shamar Stewart makes too much sense here, especially when you consider Dennis Allen was coming in as the DC. Shamar Stewart just fits right into that Cam Jordan role, and you don't even got to think about it. And you paid Dayo Odeyingbo a lot of money. Let's be honest, he's probably a guy you want as your third edge rusher. So I think it's okay to swallow your pride a little bit. I mean, like, yeah, we paid him all this money. Yeah, we can just draft Shamar Stewart as well, because Shamar Stewart has some work to be done. So I don't think he's going to be your immediate starter there. But next year he probably will be. So you get Dayo Odeyingbo to be your starter this year. Next year kind of fades down the stretch a little bit as you give Shamar more play time. Then next year Shamar takes on over fully. You still are playing 3 edge rushers every game, a lot of meaningful snaps, so it doesn't waste the signing at all. I think Shamar Stewart makes a lot of sense. I think Mykel Williams is just as in play here. It's really just about preference. Who's who? When I think about who's more similar to Cam Jordan, I'd lean Shamar Stewart. But, Dennis Allen, obviously a career Saints guy. Not a career, but he's been with them for quite a long time as the DC under Sean Payton for a few years and then the head coach for the past couple of years. So it makes a lot of sense.
It's time to wake up. Shamar Stewart is going early in this year's draft.
Absolutely. So Stewart to the Bears at 10. We have not seen that edge to the Bears at 10 mocked that much, and I don't know why. It seems to be, now with Dayo, and it's not the biggest need of all time, but absolutely is still a need.
My suspicion is that a lot of the people making these mock drafts just know that Caleb Williams got sacked a bunch last year and see that they haven't added an offensive tackle. And so they go, oh, well, they're going to add an offensive tackle.
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility. All right, 49ers here at 11. It seems like the primary name coming out of San Francisco right now is Walter Nolan, like you were talking about last week. I can't stop looking at that tackle position, man. I just can't stop doing it.
Neither can I.
It's like Walter Nolan makes a lot of sense here. They haven't brought anybody in on the interior, man. It's truly bad. Jordan Elliott and Evan Anderson are the two guys they have that our lads has as the starting defensive tackles for them. And actually, they don't even have a number 2 edge rusher. Yetur Gross-Matos is their listed number 2.
He can play. I mean, he should be your,
He used to be
third and a half best edge rusher.
Yeah. But there's also quite a few needs on this team.
They got a lot of holes. They're not in an easy spot.
If Ayuk gets traded, Ricky Pearsall and Juwan Jennings are your 2 guys. And you drafted Pearsall in the first round last year. I liked Pearsall. Obviously, he had some health issues this year. He got shot. Still managed to play some snaps. Absolutely incredible story. Hopefully, he'll be better next year. Jennings, of course, a very good player. But tackle, Colton McKivitz, your right tackle, you can do better. You can certainly do worse, but you can do better. And then Trent Williams, who knows if he'll play another snap in the league. Who knows if he'll start half the games or not. It's not somebody you can rely on anymore. When he's on the field, he's still fantastic. It's just he's not very available. So tackle is a massive need. And when I look at the tackles available, Will Campbell's still on the board. And if you're going to draft Will Campbell, you should be in a move blocking system. And, well, if there's one thing San Francisco's known for, I think it's the move blocking system. So I think you take him here, you put him at right tackle or left tackle. He can do both. And you have, if he doesn't work out, you have the flexibility because you have Colton McKivitz and Trent Williams to move him inside. Kick him inside a left guard where you got Ben Bart starting. He's not your franchise starter. I think this just makes too much sense. What do you think?
It would really surprise me if Will Campbell goes in the top 6 or 7 picks, like a lot of people have mocked him. He has the smallest wingspan of any tackle, if that's where you're going to put him. The smallest wingspan of any tackle in combine history. It's like on my spreadsheet, it is glaring red. And you don't see that near the top of the board very often. And like it or not, that does matter to GMs. That being said, I think a lot of people are fading him too far down the board because the fact is the tape is pretty exceptional, all things considered, and this is a guy who projects very favorably to the interior. This is a really good guard prospect. Again, I don't think you're taking him like you're picking a Quentin Nelson. Quentin Nelson went really early, right? Like
5,
inside the top 10. I thought so.
5 or 7.
Potentially the last top 10 guard that we've seen for
Oh, he must have been, right?
I think so. I can't think of a guard that's gone higher
Yeah.
than Quentin Nelson. I don't think he's that because, notably, Quentin Nelson played guard in college, and the fact that you're projecting Campbell to a new position does matter. However, I think he can be a tackle. Potential starting right tackle in year 1. Potentially Trent Williams' successor if Williams can't healthy up down the stretch. Or you kick him inside to guard, like you said, in that wide zone move blocking system, which I think Shanahan wants to get back to a little bit more of that because that is where he's had his greatest success. Got away from it a little bit more last season. Helps open that up. They had a combine meeting with him, and I know everybody meets with everybody at the combine, but this pick, I haven't seen it a ton. It makes a ton of sense, and I think this is right around where Will Campbell can and should go.
I agree. And one note on the combine measurements, it actually came out today that the guy doing the measurements, he was doing them wrong.
Of course. Okay, so a little tangent here. I put in all the measurements from the Senior Bowl, and I noticed that, everybody was coming out about half an inch taller, sometimes, a full 3/4. I think there were a few guys that were a full inch taller than they were listed at the Senior Bowl at the Combine, and the arm measurements came out to about half an inch to a full inch shorter. Obviously, hand measurements are always going to be weird, but yeah, if I said hand before, the arm length, it was all over the place.
Yeah. I mean, but it came out today that the guy taking the measurements was doing them wrong and refused to admit it, and they looked into it and they figured out he was doing it wrong. So those numbers aren't actually the most reliable, especially the arm length numbers and the wingspans. And Will Campbell measured in with a 33-inch arms at his pro day. So,
Oh my gosh, he did?
yeah, something
That's
to take
different.
home. That's a half an inch. It's not much of a difference, but it's a slight one. And there are some teams with a bare minimum of 33 inches, and that might put them there. So, and how teams generally, from what I understand, how teams take arm length is just the better of the combine or the pro day. So most teams will have him listed at 33-inch arms. And I think that's enough for San Francisco. They have drafted short arm guys before. Pony, I don't believe, had the longest arms of all time. They took him last year.
You wouldn't think you would.
No. And McKivitz is not a super arm length guy either. So obviously Trent Williams is, but he's been around in the league for a long time. I don't think that factors into how they draft players. Either way, I think this makes a lot of sense, and I think he'd be great for them no matter where he ends up playing. It just makes a lot of sense for a team looking to improve that offensive line and get back to their roots of just beating you the right way.
Is that where we're going?
I think so.
All right. Now, I have the Cowboys at 12. And the first guy I considered from them is Jahdae Barron from Texas. Badly needed secondary help. The secondary injuries became an absolute liability down the stretch last season. Nobody knows what they're going to do as far as their nickelback, and this is such an easy plug-and-play fit. Plus, he's a local kid. They interviewed him at the Combine. That makes a lot of sense. But then I thought about Matthew Golden. Texas kid, obviously, just like Jahdae Barron. And also, one thing I noticed on their information trail, they're like only interviewing Texas area guys this year. And it's weird because that has not been a huge Jerry Jones draft tendency, but it's something to keep an eye on to see if they kind of bias their evaluations and their selections towards Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, Texas, TCU, etc. Maybe a Jack Bash destination down the board. But Matthew Golden, he would help out Dak, who they invested in. He would help out Ceedee, who they invested in. He would help out Brian Schottenheimer, who they invested in. And Jerry Jones, I do think, is a fairly emotional drafter. If he makes those investments, he wants those investments to look good. Based on some of their interviewing, it really seems like they're looking hard at wide receiver. And look, maybe I'm overthinking it. Maybe they go defense. Maybe they go Teterow and McMillan. But Matthew Golden passes all the thresholds. He does everything you want out of a number one wide receiver. He pops on tape. He ran a 4.29 40, which is not a huge deal to me, but I'm surprised it's not being talked about more. And I'm tempted to pick Golden just to kind of make a point here that he could very well be the first wideout off the board, even if he doesn't have the elite production of someone like Ted.
Absolutely. Makes a lot of sense. I would, if I'm Dallas, I'd take Tet here.
Me too.
But, there's a reason I'm not an NFL GM, and also, Jerry's not the best NFL GM. I think that's very common knowledge. So I could absolutely easily see that happen. One thing I will ask you, do you give any credence to the Omarion Hampton goes at 12 if Gene T's not available? Because it seems in all likelihood, if Gene T's here, he will be the pick. This is his floor.
Oh, I completely agree. Oh, man.
If not, Hampton is the best consensus running back after that.
I think that he's the best running back based on the film as well. I like Judkins a lot, but Hampton would be my pick if you put a gun to my head and you have to take a halfback here. But oh boy, at 12, I know Jerry Jones is a very emotional drafter, but this would be a really rough process with only one running back off the board to go running back at 12. I give it credence. It would not shock me.
Yeah.
Because clearly they're interested in a running back. The rushing attack was very poor last year. They brought in Javonte Williams and another RB2. Miles Sanders. Those should not be their starting running backs headed into next season after what a calamity it was for them in 2024. And I think they'll look to remedy that.
Yeah.
But I think that you can get a starting running back that's better than Miles Sanders in the second round, and I don't think that you're going to be able to get a Matthew Golden caliber wide receiver. So if you're not just going to straight up veto that and tell me to take Tet McMillan, which I would understand, you have the freedom to do that. You sign off on the Golden pick?
I sign off on the Golden pick. I am a Matthew Golden believer. I love this tape. Man, this guy has some of the deepest bag of releases we've seen in this class, I think. And that is an absolute necessity for a smaller guy who's hoping to play on the outside. But the athletic tools check out. The contested catch ability checks out.
It's pretty special.
Overall hands check out. The route running's exceptional. No issues with Golden here.
All right, that's a fun one. Now we got the Dolphins at 13. And I have a little bit of a take here. I'm really interested to see where you started off.
Yeah. Dolphins at 13, man, I can't see them not taking linemen, but it's not what Miami likes to do. They don't take linemen in the first round. They just don't do it. Ever since they took Austin Jackson, we know how that turned out. And that was like, what, 30? That barely counts as a first-round pick, right?
It's not the same tier.
Exactly. This is 13, but it is a must that you need to take offensive line. Though I've heard that they are not looking at any interior offensive line prospects until day 2. So if they see a guy like Kelvin Banks more as a guard, then he probably won't go here. If it's not offensive line, because it seems like it will be, but my gut tells me that they're not going to go with it because that's just not what they do. Secondary seems like the next logical option, and Starks is a heavily mocked pick here. But something I've heard that's getting quite a bit of steam that isn't being talked about as much is Savone Revel. He seems to be very popular in Miami, and man, there's a lot of people that like him. If there's one thing we know about the GMs in the draft, especially from picks of 10 to 20, they love aliens. And Savone Revel is an alien. He's a freak of nature. I mean, this guy, if he didn't tear his ACL, would have ran a 4.3 at 6'3", 193 pounds. He's got like edge rusher length, legitimately. He didn't measure in, but arm length is absolutely nuts. I have a very low grade on him. It's clear the NFL doesn't. I don't think he's remotely out of the possibility of ranges here. I don't think I'm going to do it. I just wanted to mention it. If Revel goes here, this is where the Revel window opens, and I'm going to say his name a couple times over the next 10 picks. And if he's here in 10 picks from now, I might be a little bit surprised. I think he's going in the first round. I don't think he's just going in the first round. I think he's going in the top 25. So I am leaning offensive line here. Before I say who I think I want to take, I want to hear your takes because this is one that's got me puzzled.
I didn't know about the Revel thing, but that makes a ton of sense because I did see a lot of other teams who are picking, not here, but just a little bit later, still very much in play in the first round, seem to like Revel a lot. And it does just make sense because the tape is good. I feel like GMs are willing to overlook good tape if the guy athletically checks out. Like, okay, some guys are just athletic projects. They weren't even good college players, but their measurables are so good that, yeah, we're willing to take a chance on him in the 4th or 5th round. And that's not the case with Savone Revel. He was a very good college cornerback. Could I see him going this high? Potentially. Ahead of Will Johnson?
You got to remember.
Potentially. Ahead of Jay Barron? Potentially. Go ahead.
Every time that we say, could I see him going this high, you got to remember, NFL GMs took Cleveland Farrell at 4. They took Emmanuel Forbes at 16. Took Taco Charlton, I don't even remember where. Caleb Chason at 7. I'm aware that a lot of these are Jags picks. Trayvon Walker at 1. Damon Arnett at 30.
I was going to say, just list everything the Raiders did for about a 5-year stretch.
Alex Leatherwood at 22. Half of these are Raiders and Jags picks. It's absolutely hilarious. But they've taken DeAndre Baker at 30. They've taken a lot of stupid players in the first round, a lot of great athletes in the first round, especially cornerbacks and edge rushers. So I could see really stupid first round picks for corners and edge. I think Revel going here wouldn't be insane. I think I disagree with you a little bit. I don't think the tape was good. I love.
You don't think he was a good college corner?
I don't think
Interesting.
I think he was a fine college corner. I think maybe he was a good American Athletic Conference college corner. He would have gotten. He wouldn't have survived in the SEC, in my opinion.
Well, okay, I'm glad that somebody else watches the tape and doesn't see this dominant player that it feels like a lot of people made him out. Like, when I hear people talk about Savone Revel, they talk about him like they talk about how Mike Green dominates G5 competition. Like, no, they're in different tiers, very clearly.
I think people are typecasting him as Kenyon Mitchell type, and he's nowhere near the
No.
quality.
Oh, agreed.
Kenyon Mitchell was like Darrell Revis back there at Toledo. You just couldn't throw on him. Savone Revel consistently, every game I watched, got beat multiple times, and the ball didn't even go to him every time, but it went to him a fair few times. If there were stats about nearest defender for East Carolina games, I guarantee it wouldn't look so great for him. So if I'm picking, I'm not considering him for the top 40 picks. But I'm not. If he hadn't torn his ACL, I probably would consider maybe even the back end of the first round. But that was just the nail in the coffin. I still think NFL teams will though.
By the way, he's got 32 and 5/8 inch arms.
That's
from
ridiculous.
From the Shrine Bowl. He was third at the Shrine Bowl, but like the guys who are higher than him are Corey Thornton from Louisville and Za Frazier from UTSA. Like these are your classic big stiff press man corners that you draft in like the 7th round. They do not move like Savone Revel.
You know who also has 32 and 5/8 arms according to the combine?
Who's that?
Will Campbell. So I don't know.
All right, Savone Revel, offensive
move blocking
tackle 1.
There you go. Okay. If I go tackle, will you say that's insane?
I don't think it's insane.
Okay.
That being said, it's not the pick I made. Kelvin Banks, to be perfectly clear, is my second pick for the Dolphins. However, some of their data trail tells me that, and this is surprising because Javon Holland didn't get all that much money. I think they just could have brought him back. I know that it was kind of an iffy relationship, maybe some bridges being burned. They are really interested, from what I've seen, in replacing Javon Holland. And like you said, the Dolphins like athletes. They like playing for team speed, particularly in the early round.
Oh.
Nicky Manwari.
Yeah. There it is. I get it. I see it. I hadn't thought about it. Thinking about it now.
Starks is in play too, in my opinion.
Makes
I
a
just
lot of
think
sense.
it's easier to typecast Eman as a Dolphin.
Yeah. I think I'm going to move away from tackle. I think it's Eman Warrior Starks. I think the NFL's slightly lower on Eman Warrior than we are saying. I think we're overvaluing. I think in most cases we undervalue the athletic alien. I think we're slightly overvaluing Eman Warrior because he has actually watched his tape and I like him a lot as an athlete, but there's some rough stuff on there. I don't think he goes this high. I'm gonna go with Malachi Starks.
All right. I like that a lot.
All right. I'm going to go with Malachi Starks. We talked a lot about this pick, but I feel like this is one of the most difficult picks to make here because the Dolphins, their draft strategy is always very weird. They could take
Isaiah Bond!
Dylan Sampson.
That would be awesome.
You need another
All-time moment.
Dylan Sampson will go to this team. There's no fit I'm more sure about.
It just feels right.
Absolutely. The question is if he's going 13. All right, you're up with the Colts at 14. Seems to be an obvious chalk pick here. I wonder if you'll do it.
Ooh, an obvious chalk pick. I think it would be an obvious chalk pick if Tyler Warren was still on the board. Absolutely, because that checks too many boxes. The first name to me that comes to mind is actually Jihad Campbell.
Yep.
Is that the chalk pick?
I was thinking Colston Loveland just because everybody.
That's fair enough.
Tight end is just, if it's not Warren, it's Loveland, it seems, for the Colts.
I think I'll wait on Loveland because I do think the league views him as more of a 1 to a 2, whereas Warren is like a true 1, if not a top 10 on most teams' boards. And I do think this would be early for Loveland.
Probably where the range begins.
Certainly could see it. Yep, where the range begins. That's a great way to put it. But the Colts need linebacker. Jihad Campbell is versatile and will contribute to the pass rush, I think primarily as a blitzer. The Colts love to draft athletes. They're also, it seems to me, pretty willing to take non-traditionally premium positions early. I could see Michael Williams here as well. They do lose Dial. I think he's a good scheme fit. Kwity Paye is just kind of a guy to me. I don't think Kwity Paye is stopping you from drafting an edge rusher at 14, but why not get a little bit of the best of both worlds, kind of like we talked about with Jalen Walker. With Jihad Campbell, I think the league likes him a lot, and kind of like you said with Eman Warrior, I think maybe we're over-projecting him because I don't think he has classic, like, top 10, top half of the first round linebacker tape, but the fact is to me, head and shoulders above every other backer in this class, and that does push him up boards a little bit. By the way, Zaire Franklin with the Colts was a Pro Bowler last year because he led the NFL in snaps. Just to clarify to anybody, Zaire Franklin is not the type of linebacker who stops you from taking Jihad Campbell at 14.
No, yeah, I mean, if you want to go Jihad Campbell here, I have Loveland and Campbell written down as the most likely two here, so it makes a lot of sense.
All right, that's where I'll go.
All right. 15, the Falcons are up, and this is a weird one because there's quite a few guys still available that I don't think are available in most. In my normal mock drafts, what I would do mock drafts, there's quite a few guys who aren't normally here, namely Tyro McMillan and Will Johnson and Mikael Williams. Those are the three that I'd say have slipped. From what I've heard, I think this is where Will Johnson goes. If he makes it this far, I think Atlanta runs in the card. So I think that's what I'm going to do because, man, they have A.J. Terrell, but what else do they really have? I mean, well, let's look because off the top of my head, it just doesn't. Clark Phillips is their nickel. Mike Hughes is the opposite corner. And while he did have a good year last year, one of the best tackling cornerbacks in football, not a guy you love to trot out as your number 2 corner. I think you just go Will Johnson, let him play downhill. Fits really well with what they want to do in that system. So, any objections?
Oh, I'm absolutely not going to veto that. He was second on my list for the Falcons. They're absolutely going defense. I mean, we know that essentially for sure. I've heard that they only sent defensive evaluators to the combine. They're going defense. I think there's a good chance they go defensive line, but like you said, they also very much need secondary help, and I think that he fits the system nicely. The guy that I had circled is actually Mike Green, and I don't know that he goes this high. I kind of want to make a point that I think NFL front offices, from what I've heard, do view him as a true first-round talent. Raheem Morris was at Marshall's Pro Day. Call me crazy.
Oh, okay.
I think he's probably there to watch Mike Green.
Probably.
Who's another prospect from Marshall?
I don't think there is anybody else.
There literally may not be another draftable player from Marshall. I think he's a good scheme fit. I think that they can stand him up. And like I said, I think the NFL is higher on him than the media is. Falcons were also one of the teams that was in on Deshaun Watson, which, again, that's very generic typecasting. But it does show that they're willing to take on a degree of risk because from everything I've heard, teams knew about those allegations way before we did. But I would not remotely object to Will Johnson. Will Johnson's going to come off the board here at some point.
Yeah. I think it'll be here. It sounds like Atlanta loves him.
All right.
All right. We got Arizona at 16.
Well, they're a freaking nightmare to draft for.
Oh, yeah.
Arizona is tough because they don't have any glaring needs, but they kind of need everything.
Yeah.
Like, what's a position that they conclusively don't need? Tight end.
Yeah. Quarterback. They don't need quarterback.
Kyler Murray isn't the guy right now. I like Kyler Murray a lot. I am not advocating moving on from Kyler Murray, and we don't need to have this conversation. I'm just saying, like, Kyler Murray has put down a lot of purgatory QB tape.
Let's just say
recently.
They're not drafting a quarterback.
They're not drafting a quarterback. Jackson Dart, 16.
Jalen Milroe.
Perfect fit for their system.
Oh, yeah.
Not enough Call of Duty, though.
Yeah, like you don't need specific positions. Like you don't need nickel. You don't need left tackle, but that's about it, right? It's just like you can use any position here. So that kind of gives you the freedom to go BPA here.
So when I was trying to follow the Cards information trail, one thing I really picked up on is they are keying in on a lot of the top edge rushers. And I think it might just be whoever falls to them. Mikael Williams is still sitting here, and I like Mikael Williams falling a little bit because I think that front offices have cooled on him a bit. Maybe it's an overreaction to the whole Trayvon Walker debacle, but at the end of the day, I still think that he's a high upside, high floor prospect with good football character who is relatively position versatile because you can kick him inside and run him around on stunts, and you can play him standing up and you can play him with a hand in the dirt. There's only so much to dislike about Mikael Williams. I think we got to get him off the board at some point. That's where I'm leaning.
I agree. I mean, I'm kind of disappointed because I was going to if I'm Cincinnati, I was gonna sprint the pick. I would sprain my ankle trying to get Mikael Williams as the pick at 17. But if you're gonna steal him at 16, that makes a whole bunch of sense.
That's what we'll go with. And not to like play spoiler for your pick, but with the Bengals, I have a feeling you're probably going defense. There are still some guys that I think you're pretty comfortable with at that spot.
Oh yeah. So Mikael Williams.
Mikael Williams.
Great pick. Love Williams prospect. He's a fantastic player. But yeah, I'm picking. I'm going into the shoes of the Bengals front office. Fuck, man, we were one pick away. I almost wanted to offer you a trade. I was like, wait,
one pick.
Wait. Please don't do it. It was like a couple of years ago when actually the Cardinals were involved in this trade. I believe the 49ers moved up one spot to pick Javon Kinlaw in like 2020. They moved from 14 to 13 to pick Kinlaw, and it turned out great. No. They traded up to 13 with the Buccaneers to draft Javon Kinlaw, and then the Buccaneers took Tristan Wirfs at 14. So the Niners probably a little bit upset about that one. Just a little bit.
How that conversation would go, by the way, is I know you can't trade cash in the NFL like you can in other sports leagues, but somehow it would be the Bengals are offering, can we move up one spot? We'll give you $100,000 of cap room. And I would say $125,000, and they would say, no, we'll stay put.
No, but there is absolutely reason to trade up one pick, especially in this scenario. If Cincinnati was like, man, we want Mikael Williams, and then they know they obviously have a lot more information than we do, but they know that the Cardinals like Mikael Williams. Are like, well, listen, Arizona, we will give you a couple picks because we want this guy. If you guys want him, you can take him, but I don't think you want him enough to pass up on these picks. We'll give you a third, and we'll get our guy. Because you either miss out on your guy or you give up a third. It makes sense. And when people are like, oh, you could have just waited and made the pick.
Yeah, that's not how that works.
No, that's not how it works. It makes sense to trade up one player. But they don't get Mikael Williams. Instead, they're going to have to pivot elsewhere. Walter Nolan seems to be a very popular pick here. I think this is another potential Savone Revel spot. Just looking for that press man corner to throw in Al Golden's system. You know, the former Notre Dame DC. If he's not running press man, he's just not comfortable. And when I look at Cincinnati's depth chart, I see a bunch of guys who are smaller and will get their shit kicked in if they played press man every other snap. So, I don't know. Like DJ Turner, I mean, the biggest issue with him coming out of college, coming to Michigan, was his size. Cam Taylor-Britt sucks at football. Dax Hill, size concerns for a cornerback. So, but they need defensive line so badly. I've heard Ezaraku here. This is a tough one. I'm actually going to go. Yeah, I'm obviously need my assistant GM's permission here. Might be a little bit out there. I think they're keeping Trey Hendrickson around. I think they go Nick Emmanwori.
I was just going to tell you, they have shown a ton of interest in Nick Emmanwori. Yep. I have Malachi Starks circled. Malachi Starks is gone. I had Nick Emmanwori next in line. I also think this is a potential Mike Green destination. Yep, this is another one of the teams that was in on Deshaun Watson, so obviously that's something that they're willing to adventure into, but I think Nick Emmanwori makes a ton of sense. I think this is right around his range. I am happy to sign off on that.
Yeah, I mean, they just need Al Golden. He loves to move. Like, they played Xavier Watts a lot as a single high safety. That's because they were moving the strong safety into the box every other play. So, and with Emmanwori's skill set, he's going to know how to do that. I could also see them going like, okay, I could also see them not taking safety here and picking Xavier Watts in the second round, bring a Notre Dame guy back in. I could also see Benjamin Morrison here. I don't think the league's high on him. I am extremely high on him. I think Benjamin Morrison in the second round, if he's there, he will go to the Bengals. Al Golden, he's perfect in that system. He ran it to perfection. He knows what he wants to run. He is one of, if not the best press man corners in the draft, so makes a lot of sense there. But Emmanwori's the guy for me here.
I don't think it happens here. But I will not shoot you down for picking Benjamin Morrison in the first round because he's one of the guys where, okay, maybe NFL teams just know more about the injury than we do, and that's why it feels like we're much higher on the league and especially the media. But the tape disparity is so strong, and his preseason expectation disparity is so strong. Like, he delivered a very solid season. I don't understand this Benjamin Morrison falling into the deep second, into late day 3. That just doesn't make sense to me. And that's something where I would not be shocked if he goes in sort of that true 1 to a 2 range, pick 30, pick 31, around there. So maybe we'll pull the trigger on him later. You'll have to stay tuned. Now, we've got the Seahawks at 18. They've got 2 tackles that can start for him. They've got Abraham Lucas and they got Charles Cross. I want to pick Kelvin Banks here anyway because the Seahawks are desperate for offensive line help. Not only is it just a major need on their team, but also especially when you have Sam Darnold, who needs to be protected. Sam Darnold, who they just invested in on a multi-year deal into their future. Man, if you're bringing in Sam Darnold, you better have at least 3 quality starting linemen. And Kelvin Banks Jr., dude's just a stud. I think that he can absolutely just take Abraham Lucas's job, turn that into more of a swing player for you. And I think he's very capable of playing guard at the next level as well, if that's how you want to use his skill set. Any objections to just taking BPA on the offensive line?
I will say one objection. I don't think he plays guard for them. I think you draft him, you play him.
I mean, I agree, but go on.
I think you play him at guard. I don't think he plays tackle, sorry. I think you play him at guard immediately. And you say, Abraham Lucas, listen, because I like Abraham Lucas a lot.
He's always hurt, though.
That's the thing. The thing I have listed on my board for Seattle is just, I would be shocked if they took anything other than this 2 types of player. Hybrid defender or an offensive lineman with tackle guard flexibility. So I have 6 guys on my board. All 3 of the hybrid defenders, Jalen Walker, Jihad Campbell, and Nick Murray, were gone. All 3 of the O-linemen that I have circled for them, Kelvin Banks, Donovan Jackson, and Gray Zabel, are all still here, and I think Banks is the best one. Absolutely think it's the right decision. I think week 1 they play Banks. If Lucas goes down, you can immediately move him to tackle, and you feel super comfortable with that because the interior offensive line for this team is not good.
It's a disaster, worst in the league.
Darnold crumbles under interior pressure, so you honestly need guard more than you need tackle right now. So I'd rather improve a shitty interior offensive lineman than improve a quality starter in Abraham Lucas. So I love the pick either way, though. I think you can. Banks is just a guy I feel very confident is going to succeed with, especially one of the guys who's overperformed, positional metrics like arm length and hand size and height. He came in an inch taller than we expected him to, than he was listed. So, he's been absolutely a riser in the process, the combine process. He's looked good athletically, and he has some pretty good tape. Questions about whether he can play tackle, I do think he can. I think he'd be a really good guard, though. I think his ceiling is a little bit limited for specific reasons. I don't think we're going to get into the too nitty gritty here. This is a predictive. We're mostly trying to go through process here, but this is the perfect spot for him.
In this universe, Seattle does not make a mistake, and this pick is locked in. Bucks at 19.
All right, yeah, Bucks at 19. I'm odds. Yeah, so this is my pick. Okay. I just kind of have whoever's left on the defensive line board.
I had the same thing written down for them. God damn it. I mean, I had Jihad Campbell, but he didn't get here.
Yeah. I think they're going to be all – if Campbell's here. There's so many teams, and there's no way he gets out of the teens. Like, more than I think about it, I just think there's no way. I want the Broncos to draft him at 20. I just don't think he makes it. Everybody needs a linebacker in the teens, and everybody could use him. You've got an athletic freak who also knows how to play the position decently well and is also really young. You feel confident. Any coach feels confident they can mold a guy like that into an all-pro. So, but the Bucs will not be able to take him here. Instead, as I said, I think they just take the best defensive lineman or edge available, and let's look at who is available. Let's just look. Mike Green, James Pierce, Donovan Ezeraku, Kenneth Grant, Walter Nolan, and Derek Harmon are the 6 best defensive linemen. Or the 6 guys I think they'd consider here. I'd lean edge, just because you've got Vea, Hall, and Cansey. That's a quality group, and I don't think the difference between the best defensive tackle. I think the best edge is probably a better player than the best tackle on this board. Who do I want to go with here? I'm tempted to go with Mike Green. I'm just not sure how far he's going to fall. I obviously we did the edge rushers video last week. Y'all remember how much I loved him as a prospect, but I don't know how much the character issues are going to cause him to fall. You know what I mean? I'm going to go as Araku here unless you want me to take Mike Green. I'm perfectly fine with it.
To be perfectly honest with you, I am ready to make kind of that mini take about Mike Green that I think teams view him as a true first-round talent and are willing to overlook some of the off-field stuff. I would not veto Donovan Ezaraku, but my favorite pick would be Mike Green.
All right, let's go Mike Green because I do agree with you. I think he probably has a better chance to be the pick, but this was more just like I think the league's really high in Ezaraku, and I wanted to give him some shout. I think him going in the teens is an absolute possibility.
We'll see if he gets some love later. I have a feeling he will.
Reminds me quite a bit of not necessarily kind of a similar player, but I think he could have a similar draft jump as Will McDonald. As you remember, there were people talking about him, a fringe first-round guy, most likely like a 40th overall pick, goes 16 to the Jets. I think that a similar thing could happen. I had him written down for the Bengals at 17. But Mike Green's going to be the pick here for the Bucs at 19. That brings up the Broncos at 20. Curious where you want to go.
All right, so I have 3 guys on my board for the Broncos, and all of them are still available.
Yeah.
My number 1 is actually maybe not who a lot of people, again, I'm not sure about you. You obviously have a much better beat on Denver than I do. It's actually Kenneth Grant. They've interviewed him multiple times. I think it makes sense to stay ahead of a potential Zach Allen extension, which could get pricey. John Franklin Myers. I know correct me if I'm wrong, but there's been some conversations about John Franklin Myers and wanting to get paid. He gets the production. He has the win rate stats. Those players are going to get pricey, and I think Kenneth Grant just makes a lot of sense for them. And then Omarion Hampton, I'm very much considering because Denver needs its lead back, like pretty badly.
Oh, yeah.
That's a focal point in the Broncos offense. And correct me if I'm wrong on this as well, I'm not super comfortable with Jaleel McLaughlin or Audric Estime. That's maybe not a Raiders caliber running back room because those players can at least play, unlike Zamir White and Alexander Madison. But in this running back class, they're going to start going, and you want to get ahead of the curve. And then Colston Loveland, the obvious one. I'm not one of the people who's saying signing Evan Ingram, who's a slot receiver, not a tight end, by the way. I just want to clear that up. And some people say Colston Loveland's the same way. I disagree. Like you, I know, think that you can play Colston Loveland in line. Signing Evan Ingram does not mean that they're going to take a first-round tight end. However, one thing I have observed is the Broncos seem to be aggressively pursuing Gunnar Helm, Mason Taylor.
They love Taylor.
Terrence Ferguson.
And Ferguson.
There is a solid second class of tight ends in this year's draft. And I think they're pretty comfortable that they can get one of those guys who can play a different role than Evan Ingram and be a year 1 impact. So that's why I'm leaning toward Kenneth Grant. But obviously, your opinion is number 1 on this pick.
Normally, I'd agree with you. But there's a guy on the board that's available that isn't usually available here. I don't think the Broncos would pass on Tet if he's here.
I'm not going to lie, I kind of forgot that Tet was still sitting around.
I've been looking to fit him in. It's just it doesn't make too much sense anywhere here. I think it makes quite a bit of sense here. They desperately need a guy who can work after the catch. Oh, yeah, 6'5", 212 Tet McMillan, surely a guy who's great after the catch? Yeah. He's got an A+ run after the catch on my traits grade board. This guy's nuts. And then he's also good at a lot of things. Courtland Sutton's not going to be around forever. Let's face that. Tet McMillan can slide in immediately and be that guy that just can do it all for you. He fills a need that's not really there. A guy who can make stuff happen after the catch and also be really physical at the catch point. Courtland Sutton can do that, but again, he can't do everything. You get Tet McMillan for the next couple of years while Bo Nix is still on his rookie contract. Those guys can do everything. You let Marvin Mims do whatever you want him to do, and all of a sudden this receiver room is pretty fun. Tet has a high range of outcomes. I don't think any of them are below a starting. I don't think any of them are below starting quality receiver. I don't think they'd pass on Tet here. I will give you Kenneth Grant if you want to make the pick. I'll give you a Marion Hampton if you want to pick. I don't think they'd take Loveland over Tet here.
I completely agree with the Loveland thing. And I also do want to add, obviously he's really similar to Courtland Sutton, but I don't think they're redundant because you can use Drake London as the big slot role and just have like significantly upgraded Devon Vele as well, who then becomes more of a depth target for them.
Sean Payton also loves he loves to use the 4th and 5th receiver, like not 4 and 5 receiver sets, but rotate them in. Every game, little Jordan Humphrey was getting 15 snaps or so, and he was wide receiver 4.
I think that the league is a little bit lower on Tet than we are, maybe, but certainly the media is. I don't think he gets much farther than this. I'm going to take Tetairoa McMillan to the Broncos at 20.
I would be rather giddy with this pick. I really was trying to fit him in, but I think this is the logical spot for him to go. But Kenneth Grant also makes a ton of sense. I've heard Walter Nolan here, and Amarian Hampton makes a ton of sense as well. So no complaints with either of those picks, but Broncos get their receiver, and honestly, a guy who can be a little bit of that. Oh, God, we need to stop. I really wish the NFL community would stop saying Joker. As a Broncos fan, I've heard that word so many times the last couple of months. I'm just like, Jesus Christ. Can the draft just be over with so I don't have to hear that word again? But he's you can use him in a lot of different ways. He can be a big slot, go on the outside. Heck, you can even put him in at running back, and he can bowl guys over. Play him in line. Do whatever you want. Sean Payton will get creative. He'll have fun with him. And of all the teams in the league, I think the Broncos are probably up there for my favorite Ted McMillan landing spot.
This is going to be a scary pick for them in a good way.
Yeah. All right, Steelers are up at 21, and I think this is the second opening of the Jackson Dart sweepstakes. I don't think anybody in the teens is really thinking about it. But then Steelers open it up at 21, and just there's a couple teams from here on out that I really am going to consider.
They took Kenny Pickett, but they took Kenny Pickett later and to be a starting quarterback and when he was the number 1 QB in his class, and it didn't work out.
Yeah, and we haven't had the Rodgers decision yet. I don't think that influences too much.
True, because if Rodgers does sign with them, he's their starting quarterback, and if Rodgers doesn't sign with them, I think they'd rather go hunting for a stopgap instead of deploying Jackson Dart.
Yeah. Jeez. There's a couple of ways I'm leaning. I've heard Derek Harmon here a lot.
I don't mind that.
Barron's still here.
Yep.
Luther Burden's still here. I don't think he'll be here. I think we let him go a little bit too far. I think we got to find a place for him soon. I don't think the Steelers want to pick here.
You think they want to move down?
I think they want to move down, and I think somebody wants to move up for either Luther Burden or J.D. Barron. So you look at your picks, I'll look at my picks. We don't have to make the trade, but if there's anybody that feels like they would love Luther Burden here or J.D. Barron.
Full transparency, I do have the Steelers picking J.D. Barron here.
You do.
Beanie Bishop punched above his weight class last year, but I did think it became very clear that the Joey Porter versus the World show is not the way to go. This feels like a very blue-collar, quiet but sound Pittsburgh pick. And like you said, I especially do appreciate if they move down to have maybe a little bit less options on the defensive line because, like you said, it could be Walter Nolan, it could be Derek Harmon, it could still very much be Kenneth Grant, I think. And they want to keep adding bodies to that hockey line and keep that strong and keep the floor of this team very much intact. Fortunately, there aren't any good Wisconsin linemen in this year's class because that would be a chalk pick. So if a team does come up for Luther Burden, I could see that. Who do you think it is?
I'm gonna give you two options. I'm either gonna take here it is. Beep beep beep. Hold on. Beep beep beep. Hello. Oh, okay. Hello. This is how am I forgetting who the Steelers GM is? Sorry. Yeah, this is Omar Khan with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Is this Brandon Beane from the Buffalo Bills?
It sure is.
Would you like to move up for Luther Burden?
Oh,
Because if not,
that's a tough call.
Listen, I'm going to take J.D. Barron if you don't, but he's not making it at 30. Let's be honest.
Oh, absolutely not.
Casario's going to take him at 25 if he's Houston. Hell, 22. He might be going to Los Angeles. And I don't think you're going to get a better. I don't think any of them are going to trade that pick away. So you want Burden, you got to come up and get him now. I want your second round pick.
Well, I'll tell you what I'm thinking, and that's that we're really hungry for just a run-stuffing defensive lineman, a guy that we can deploy as a one-tech. And there are still some of those guys sitting on the board, so I don't think that we're willing to come up the board and give you a second-round pick for Luther Burden when hasn't been a run on wide receivers yet. We still think there's a decent chance that somebody who can play falls to us later on.
Screw you, I'm going to pick Jackson Dart. Click. Okay, we're going to take Jahdae Barron.
Am I an asshole for shooting that trade down?
No. I would have shot that trade down. I would never
Okay.
make that trade if I'm Buffalo.
Okay.
I was just going to call you to see if you would, because I think that's what Pittsburgh does. I don't think they want to make this pick too much because I don't think this has never been a team. Well, yeah, I think they're fine taking Barron here. I don't think they would want. I think they want to move back further and get a guy like Derek Harmon, which he probably won't be there. But there's a lot of defensive linemen still available. I think they like their chances to move back. But
And I think
you
this
got
is
to tango. Nobody's going to want to move up.
this is a very healthy pick for Jahdae Barron
Yeah.
because I think Barron is another one of the guys who the NFL is lower on than maybe the media is. Jahdae Barron is a really solid cornerback, but I don't think he brings the elite upside that teams want to draft in the top half of the first round. I remember some of the conversations from unnamed GMs I've heard, but from sources that I trust are, well, actually how they were framed is, yeah, we view Jahdae Barron as a late first-round pick. We don't think he's making it out of round one, whereas the media is like, he's going top half of the first round, maybe even top 10. And I think we meet somewhere in the middle. Very good cornerback prospect. Fits what the Steelers want to do. I don't think this is a bad pick for them at all.
I'm a lot more comfortable with him here than I am with him at 11 to the Niners.
Certainly.
All right, Chargers at 22. You got plenty of options.
So we got both the Michigan guys still sitting on the board.
Yep.
Kenneth Grant and Colston Loveland. I think Colston Loveland is who the chalky pick would be here. Because
Is there a Michigan tie-in in Los Angeles?
am I stupid?
No, I'm joking.
Okay, because I'm like new to knowing all the coaches in the NFL, and so like I have to second guess myself on who all the coaches and GMs are and where they were previously. So just to be clear, Victor, Jim Harbaugh coached for the University of Michigan, right?
Yeah, for quite a bit.
For quite a bit. I thought he had like some success there or something.
Yeah, I think he kicked some red and gray ass.
Ah, see. Colston Loveland makes a lot of sense. Their data trail shows that they're interested in tight end. It's obviously a focal point in the Harbaugh offense. And is Stone Smart still their starter?
Probably.
Stone Smart's a good ball
They might have
player.
brought in like Gerald Everett or something.
Or maybe Tyler Conklin?
Well, that makes. I think it was Conklin. They brought in Conklin and Disley.
And that's a solid tight end room. That's a solid tight end room. You have 3 tight ends that you can play. You don't have the tight end you want in that offense, but like we've already touched on, this is a deep tight end class. And the run on defensive linemen is going to happen in a hurry.
Yeah.
They lost Puna Ford in free agency. Did they lose somebody else in free agency or just Puna?
They lost Ford. Bosa went to the Bills.
And Bosa, of course, yes.
No, because they brought back Tier Tart. No, wait. Yes.
I think they did.
Yeah, they did. They brought back Tier Tart. Yeah, no. I think it was they lost Ford and Bosa.
The defensive line was a very big part of the Chargers' success last season. I think they want to sustain that. And Kenneth Grant just checks all the boxes. Plus, you've got the Michigan connection. I think he's maybe going to go a little bit earlier than people expect because I know he, in theory, doesn't have the highest upside as a pure pass rusher. Just, because of his size profile, because of his pass rushing profile in college. Man, he's young. He could develop a really strong moveset, and I do think he's a guy who could get there. This is a terrible comp, but he reminds me a little bit of Michael Williams, but on the interior. Plus, he's just an insane size-adjusted athlete. He's going to do everything they want him to do. I'm going to take Kenneth Grant to the Chargers unless you're going to veto this.
Love the pick. I think it's exactly where they go.
All right.
There's so many options you could do. I have other guys I wanted to mention. I think Hampton is absolutely. I think he's been in play for the Broncos. I think he's been in play for the Steelers. I think he's been in play for the Chargers. Hasn't gone yet. Will go soon. And I put down Jaden Higgins' name as well. Need an outside receiver, and he's one of the few outside receivers on the board here. I think maybe the only one. Especially, they're pissed. The Broncos took Ted. They are fuming. He is the perfect fit for what they need right now.
Oh, absolutely.
But Higgins made a lot of sense here, but I totally agree with you on Kenneth Grant. I think he's the right pick here.
It's time for Green Bay.
Green Bay, obviously, you're a Packers fan. I chose the odds and you chose even so that we could give each other's teams a stab. And the first thing I have written down is Jaden Higgins. Makes quite a bit of sense here. I don't know that's what I'm going to do. I just wanted to mention it because I do think Higgins he's got a real shot at going in the first round. I don't think a lot of people talking about it. I love his tape. He's just really smooth athlete for someone that big and plays mistake-free football. I mean, there's not many times where you watch him is like, yeah, that was a bad rep. So he was like, yeah, I wanted a little bit more sometimes, but you're never disappointed, I think. And he doesn't have the highest ceiling, but he's got such a strong floor. He's a good player. I comp him to Cortland Sutton, and I think they could really use that kind of player. There are also quite a bit of other players on the board here that I do think they consider, and I really think they'd consider defensive line here. I think they'd look at corner. Savone Revel is on my board for them here, I know. But I want to hear your take on what you think they'll do here.
I would love Jaden Higgins. They won't do that.
No.
They never do. Walter Nolan is very prototypical for the Packers. I actually tend to think he has a little bit more refinement than people give him credit for. But he's got the athleticism. He projects as a pass-rushing three-tech. Devontae Wyatt has not transformed into that for the Packers. It's about time to admit defeat on that investment, I think. I could also see him pulling the trigger on Nick Scorton as I don't want to call him a project, but that speed-to-power 4-3 end with versatility in Hafley's defense just makes a ton of sense because the fact is Rashawn Gary took a step back as a pass rusher last year, the first year of Hafley's defense. Van Ness isn't giving you anything. Not really. He's not giving you number 2 production, not at this point. And Brenton Cox and Kingsley Enagbari, the 3 and 4s, they're role players for you. So I could see that as well. And I think the league is maybe a little high on Scorton. I could see him slipping into the first round. I don't know who's going to go first, him or Ezeraku. Probably Ezeraku. I think the league likes Ezeraku a lot. They're going to take fucking Savone Revel.
Yeah. I don't want to do it to you, but they're going to it's Revel here.
They've had multiple encounters with him. He fits exactly what the Packers want. Brian Gutekunst marches to the beat of his own drum. He's not afraid to take injury guys. He loves his relatively stiff but long and athletic cornerbacks. This is a flawless fit, and I think it's what they're going to do.
Fuck, I was going to give you an out, but then I realized I can't because I was going to say I have Revel circled for the Vikings. But they're not going to do an in-division trade.
Oh, no way.
They're not going to do it. If it was any other team, I was going to give you an out and be like, listen, man, I'm going to give you the chance to offer me 24 for 23, move up. But I can't do that for the NFC North. You take Savone Revel. I don't feel great about it.
Brian Gutekunst is in a Mexican standoff with Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah over Savone Revel. And he's pointing the gun at Mensah, and then he's pointing it at his own head, and he's saying, all right, who's going to take Savone Revel in the first round?
It's okay. It could be worse. He could take Darren Porter.
You think that's worse?
Yeah, I do.
That's fair enough. Or he could take
Actually.
the classic joke, he could take Smile Munden with this pick.
Yeah. Ooh, I'm really trying to get out of... No, I'm trying to get out of picking him for you guys. I'm now considering, I'm not going to do it. Azareye'h Thomas came to mind. I think he could go in the first round. I'm going to take Revel.
Azareye'h Thomas doesn't have the RAS score.
No,
he ran
he
something like a 4.58 at his pro day. Don't get me wrong. I still like him. I still think the league likes his mentality. They like his chops playing man-to-man coverage. Just Brian Gutekunst is one of the few pure RAS GMs in the NFL. I love this. Victor, I love this because it feels like I'm getting an early preview of the draft for the Green Bay Packers.
Already disappointed.
Savone Revel, welcome to the team.
All right, Vikes at 24. You're picking for the enemy.
All right, so you talked about how you had Savone Revel circled for the Vikings, and I have a different cornerback circled. And that's Trey Amos out of Ole Miss, who they've had multiple meetings with. Kwesi is willing to sort of reach for his guy down the board.
Especially corner. He's done it a lot.
Especially corner. And he's not huge on athleticism either. It's not one of his biggest priorities. And Trey Amos isn't a guy who, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think he lit up the RAS numbers. Don't get me wrong, he's not a
No.
bad athlete.
I think he's a better athlete than some guys give him credit for, but that's not why. Honestly, I'm a little bit lower on him, but
As am I.
from what it seems like people place a premium on his zone coverage and his instincts, not really his athleticism.
The other notes that I have written down are top remaining safety. Both the two high-end safeties are gone, so you can cross that off. Derek Harmon or more defensive interior. Even though they added multiple players to the defensive interior, they're both on the older end. And everything I've seen from the Vikings implies that they want more beef up front. You can never have enough. And running back would be fun.
Yeah.
Man, I like the Trey Amos fit a lot. And
Amos.
I like mixing things up sort of at this point where these are maybe not I want to make the pick that's most likely for the team, but I don't like it to be the top 32 players getting drafted in the first round because there's always some chaos that goes on.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that this is predicting chaos in the most predictable way. You sign off on this pick?
I do.
All right.
Trey Amos to the Vikes.
Cornerback run starts now. Is Aurier next up?
And then Hairston after that.
Correct.
Texans in the clock. There's no way it isn't Josh Simmons. I can't see it not being him.
It should be.
But it seems like I think they've had a visit with him or two.
They haven't, not that I could
they
find.
They haven't? No?
Nope.
Okay.
They did intensively interview like Josh Connerly and Charles Grant. They really went hard after the guys who seemed like they could be available in rounds 2 and 3.
But who would they go for if they're not going for offensive line is the question.
This is so stupid. What about Luther Burden?
He's still here?
He's still here.
Shit. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's Burden. I did not realize. I should have known he was still here. But no, I mean, I don't think he falls this far in real life. But yeah, I mean, again, I think I consistently see him mocked super high. I'm not a Burden guy. I think he's just his round 1 through 2 receiver. He impressed me a lot with his run after the catch, but there's some severe issues with just his whole middle of the field profile. Really is a disappointment for me. I don't think how he's picking for every team he goes that high, but everybody seems to love him. People think he's the wide receiver 1 in the class, so it seems unlikely he falls out of the top 20. But in this scenario, he does. Maybe the league is a little bit lower on him than the media is. Burden to the Texans at 25 makes a lot of sense. You good with it?
I love how unsatisfying that is. Again,
Yeah.
I think that this is a very realistic exercise. It's not about taking the best pick, even down the board. You still got to stick with team tendencies.
This is a good pick, though.
It's a solid pick. It is.
This is a good pick. I'd prefer Josh Simmons, but I do think this is what they do.
Now we have the LA Rams at 26, and I'm not going to lie. A lot of the guys that I had circled are gone. I do have any OL.
I've got one guy circled.
Written down. Is that guy an OL?
No, he's not.
This is James Pierce Jr.
Just you do your spiel, and then I'll tell you.
I'm kind of going to default to you because I think that they're looking to fill in the offensive line. That is what their data trail seems to suggest. They certainly could use depth there. I mean, they could even use starting talent as well. They don't take defensive backs high is the one trend that I noticed. So even if that's a need, I don't think they're pulling the trigger on a Maxwell Hairston here. I could very much see James Pierce Jr. as well. Get that second edge rusher and bolster the defensive line further, but who do you have circled for them?
If there's one team I think pulls the trigger on Jackson Dart in the first round, I think it's Los Angeles. They love him, apparently. Apparently they love him, and they know Matthew Stafford isn't going to be around forever, but they know Dart takes a couple of years. This just seems like, let's pick Lamar Jackson. Well, we have a couple more years of Joe Flacco, then let's put in Lamar Jackson once we feel like we've gotten enough out of Flacco. I don't think I'd do it if I was the Rams, but I think that's what they have a really good shot at doing. There's a lot of guys on the board. I won't fault you if you don't go this way. I'm just saying, I think if there's any team that takes him, it'd be Los Angeles. I'd still probably say it's more likely they go with someone else than him, but I would say it's a significant possibility, not a probability, but a possibility. I want to put it on your board, in your radar, that they have TED Talks about him.
When I'm thinking about where I think Shedeur Sanders should go and not where he will go, I don't love the Steelers, personally. I keep coming back to the Rams, and I do think that they're a very potentially fruitful destination for a young quarterback. And I don't know if Jackson Dart goes here. Like I've said, I don't even know if Jackson Dart goes in the first round. But I feel like picking him here improves the overall quality of the mock. I think it eases some of the fits down the board. I think it makes a point. I think that this is well within Jackson Dart range. Maybe we're all crazy. Maybe the GM see him in a very similar vein to us and he goes late second. But I think I'm going to pick Jackson Dart to the LA Rams.
I think the GMs probably do see him in a similar vein to us, and that's why he goes here. Because this is where you take round 2 through 3 quality quarterbacks. You take them at the end of the first round.
Get that fifth-year option.
Yeah. All right, Jackson Dart here to the Rams. I've also heard that I think they've visited with Milrow. So
First round, Jalen Milrow.
it's possible.
To play running back.
All right. Baltimore Ravens. Just one note I had. This is where the Malachi Starks range ends. Most people think that if he gets to Baltimore, they are not going to pass on him. I have whatever D-line value is there. That just always seems like what they do. We did not draft Jaden Higgins. He's also on my board for Baltimore.
He'd be a good fit.
I think Walter Nolan makes quite a bit of sense here. Well, because he's probably not filling a role that you don't already have with Madubuike, but he got a strong interior. This is a tough pick. I think they need edge. I don't love their room. I know I'm just a little bit lower on it.
Well, you know who's sitting around, who's inathletic, a little bit of projecting to do on him, who kind of fits that standing up scheme, who I think this is well within his range. That's James Pierce Jr., who hasn't left the board yet.
If I'm going to take an edge here, I think it'd be Ezraku.
You think that's who the Ravens would take?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's who they'd take over Pierce. This is not a team that is generally known for drafting guys with character issues. Listen,
enough.
I get it. Ray Lewis was on this team for a long time, but in recent history, they've been running this ship very tight.
And Ray Lewis's football character was commendable.
Exactly. On the field, this guy was a guy you want in your locker room, and on the field, I don't think James Pierce is necessarily a guy that teams are going to love. Ezraku is, though, makes quite a bit of sense. It's a tough pick. I'd be curious your thoughts on it. I'm leaning Ezraku. I honestly don't want to make this pick here.
So, one of the major beats that I got when I was looking at all these teams, one that really stood out to me is
maybe Derek Harmon. Sorry.
When I've talked to Ravens fans, they all get kind of pissed when I talk about drafting them anything but an edge rusher. It seems like they might go cornerback here. Like, this is a very strong Maxwell Hairston is a name that I've really seen come up. Or Azarie Thomas. So I think, and when you look at their depth chart, it's like they need a number 2 cornerback. I think who's one of their respected beat reporters? It's Jeff Zur something.
I have no idea.
And I think most Ravens fans consider him to be the best beat reporter in Baltimore by far, but also one of the best beat reporters who has one of the most reliable beats on any team in the NFL. And an article he published was something to the effect of, it might be tough for the Ravens to fill their number 1 need. And it's like, oh, he's expecting a run on edge rushers. No, he's expecting a run on cornerbacks. And 2 of the guys he listed lined up with my initial take as well. And they're Maxwell Hairston and Azarie Thomas. So they could go corner. They could go edge. They could go Ezraku, absolutely. They could fill out the interior defensive line. I didn't have Walter Nolan still being here when I made my mock draft where I'm 32 picks deep and we're going to try out the second round. So I'm going to leave this up to your discretion, but it feels like there are 4 or 5 solid directions that they could go.
Oh, yeah. I don't think it'll be corner here because I think the acquisition of Chidobe Awuzie, it's enough to the point where, like, it's not your number 1 need. Yeah, he's still got some juice in the tank. Oh. Yeah, I'm going to go with Derek Harmon here. I just think he's a great player. He's probably the best player if you want to win a Super Bowl this year that's still available. I think he's going to come in and make an immediate impact for you in a way that no other guy really will on the board right now. So I think this is just a classic Ravens pick, and it's what they make here.
Completely fair.
Lions at 28.
All right, so I think they want to add depth to the defensive line. I had Derek Harmon circled. Obviously, he's off the board now. They could go Walter Nolan. That's very possible. I mean, I know they got Osa Odigizua to get after the right. No, they don't have Osa. Osa's a Cowboy. Who's the? They have Levi on Wozurike.
Yeah.
To get after the quarterback a little bit. He's not going to stop you from drafting Walter Nolan. However, there's a player who's listed a little bit lower on PFF Sports. So on my first look through, I didn't see him. But then, oh my gosh, did the name Tyler Booker to the Lions pop. Just a nasty mauling sort of player. His intelligence on tape, you can feel it. He's never going to be the Quentin Nelson type to give the center help and kind of send the nose tackle that way, and then put a guy on the ground one-on-one, and then feel the slot corner coming around from the other side and flip his hips and hit him. He'll see the slot corner. He just won't be able to get there.
Yeah.
The Lions like to be multiple on the ground, and that's a straight-up issue for Tyler Booker because he is authentically very slow. Like, the Dolphins, for example, cannot take him. I don't know if the Seahawks can take him if they don't have like a Calvin Banks Jr. sitting on the board. But the Lions do run a ton of mashing gap and counter in power. Now, what does the offense look like without Ben Johnson? We're kind of yet to see. I don't think they get all the way away from what they've built. If anything, maybe they lean into that aspect even more. Outstanding football character as well. Helps replace Kevin Zeitler. That offensive line is a huge part of what makes Detroit. I think that the league is probably a little lower on Tyler Booker than media is. I think he kind of got shoehorned into that. He's the best interior offensive lineman in the class, so therefore he must go in like the Jahad Campbell range. He doesn't have the upside of a Jahad Campbell, but if the Lions are looking at Tyler Booker sitting here as a plug-and-play quality guard for a decade to come, I think that's where they go.
Absolutely. And I just think it's, like, as you said, teams like the Seahawks they're going to have him low on their board. But teams like I had him circled at 17 for the Bengals. I think that would be a great pick, and I think they'd be very happy with that. He's just got a high range because he's just such a scheme-specific guard. Play him in the gap or you don't play him at all. So, yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
All right, I think that's where we'll go for the Detroit Lions. Next up is the Washington Commanders at 29. And this feels like there's a high range of outcomes here.
Oh, yeah. There's something I'm looking at here. And, it's got me kind of excited. Yep. Ooh. I'm thinking about a Marion Hampton here. He's not usually here. In this scenario, he is. You just brought in Laramie Tunsil. That really bolsters the offensive line. Now, I don't think that's a super big need because you can move Cosme into guard. He was already playing that sometimes. But sometimes you had him on the left tackle. Brandon Coleman was my biggest concern, even though I do like him as development. You brought him in. You brought Debo in. So now a receiver isn't a pressing need. They're doing some hole patching on the offensive line. They brought in a lot of quality guys in free agency just to fill the gaps. I still think you need somebody at the corner position. That's why I will consider guys like Azaria Thomas is really high up there for me here. An edge would also be good. Oh, God. It always gets tougher down the board. Let's see. Do you think they'd take Hampton here?
See, it's not the most pressing need because you've still got Austin Eckler, who can play in that sort of third down role. And Brian Robinson is a perfectly fine, adequate starting running back, but Omarion Hampton has the potential to be more than that. They have a lot of needs. They don't have a ton of pressing needs. You want to win. Like, this is a team that's focused on winning now, and I think running back in the first round, no matter who you are, is something of a win-now pick. I could certainly see this. I think Omarion Hampton goes round 1. I have him at an interesting landing spot in my mock draft, which whether you take him here or not, we'll have that conversation because I want to get your take on it. But I would certainly sign off on Omarion Hampton. He's going to go in the first round. He should. He deserves to.
Absolutely, but I think I've changed my mind. I'm leaning Donovan Ezaraku here. Just get a springy bendy edge rusher who's a smart player, can defend the run, can do whatever you want for him. He's a guy that is definitely a win now player as well. They need edge. He fits the mold of what they like to do in Washington. Objections?
Not an objection, but I will say, let me bring up Washington's 2024 draft class, since that was their GM's first one.
They drafted Johnny Newton, but they didn't draft an edge.
There's an interesting tendency I picked up on. I thought maybe I'm grasping at straws here. I also think it's worth noting that they brought in Deebo Samuel. They got aggressive and traded for him. They got aggressive and traded for Laramie Tunsil. It does feel like they're going pretty hard on the offense. Like, they're doing interesting stuff to improve the offense. They just paid mediocre players a bunch of money to come to the defense. So they got innovative on offense, and they threw money at the problem on defense. Come on, why is that the entire 2024 NFL draft? I want the Commanders.
I will say, of course, they do run a 4-3 there, but it's kind of a multiple scheme, especially with what they do with Frankie Louvu. I think they could do interesting things with Azaraku as well.
All right, 2024 Commanders draftees. Jaden Daniels was a little bit of a surprise at number 2. Like, we knew it would happen, or at least we had a pretty good idea going in, but for a long time, most people preferred Drake May, who's the more conventional pro-style player. Then Johnny Newton. That was a good value. A lot of people thought for where they got him at, but a more undersized defensive tackle. Mike Sainristil, it's kind of an innovative pick. I mean, not who we conventionally think of as an outside corner, and they went after him. They said he's a good football player, and they brought him in. Ben Sinnott in the second round, an athletic, unique sort of tight end, a little bit of an H-back role. They went after Luke McCaffrey in round 3, converted slot receiver. Brandon Coleman in the third round. I don't know how to describe their type, but it feels like they have a type.
I figured out the type.
You combine that with the fact that they're willing to do some sort of funky, unconventional stuff on offense, and who I have them going is actually Gray Zabel.
Yeah, that's one thing. I like that. Defensively, if they had a type, I think it'd be Nick Scorton here.
I have Nick Scorton second on my list of potential draftees.
Okay, I think they should go Azaraku, but Scorton would make a lot of sense. He's bigger, which they like. He's athletic. He's a weird player who you're not sure where he's going to fit in. And I do think they go defense because we do got to remember they've invested in the offense. I think they've invested in the offense because they want to go heavy in the draft on defense. Got to remember their head coach is a defensive coordinator. It was a former defensive coordinator, Dan Quinn.
Good point.
They tried to build this team through the defense last year. Just happened to be that Jaden Daniels was awesome at football, so that kind of helped. So you get veterans to help him in the offense to build that up around him. Then you get great players to jumpstart that defense through the draft. I like Scorton here. What do you think?
I love it. I think that's a great compromise, and I'm excited to get Nick Scorton into the first round because I feel like some team will attach to his upside enough because, again, the consensus board is not what makes draft picks. It only takes one, and my money's on the fact that there will probably be one.
All right, Bills at 30. What do you got?
All right, so I had Derek Harmon circled.
Well, they did pass up the trade.
They passed up the trade. He's gone.
Yeah.
And who's left is Walter Nolan.
Ooh. See, I feel like every year we talk about, the Bills need a run-stopping defensive lineman. It would be so Buffalo for them to we're going to take a defensive lineman. We're going to take a pass rush specialist.
That would be really funny, and I could certainly see that. I wrote best remaining one tech defensive tackle, Trey Amos. No.
What?
Premium wide receiver prospect. I mean, they're not going to draft Egbuka.
No, he's just Shakir. Like, he's just redundant.
He's just Shakir. And then best player available on the offensive line. But you can't go Simmons, can you? Can you?
No, you can't go Simmons here, but there's a receiver. I think they'd take Jaden Higgins here if they could, which he's here. I'm just throwing it out there if they want an outside guy. They don't really have that right now. He's not Coleman or Palmer.
Let me check the depth chart real quick, because I agree that he's not Coleman or Palmer.
Inside-out flexibility.
They have a starting 3, but Josh Palmer's not your long-term answer there.
Also, Keon Coleman's not really a guy you want on every down, I think, at this point in his career.
I think I agree with that. The interior offensive line isn't great. But do they really take like Gray Zabel here?
No,
I don't think so.
Because Edwards is fine. Torrance, you still believe he's shown plenty to keep him starting, and there's no center you'd take here. Maybe Jared Wilson, maybe.
I'm not comfortable with Jared Wilson there based on the tape. It's going to be interesting to see what
where
front
he
offices
goes.
think of him. Definitely.
Take Dalton Kincaid 2.0.
Wait, is Colston Loveland?
Yeah,
He's still on the board?
I think he could easily be though.
Yeah, that is fair enough. Like I said, I think he's a 1 to a 2. They won't go safety. I mean, safety isn't an option regardless. They won't go linebacker. That's not an option regardless. It's strongly pointing to wide receiver or defensive line. And I think you can wait on defensive line. You can get a C.J. West in the 4th round, or a Jordan Phillips in the 3rd round, or a Tyleek Williams in the 2nd round. Big, heavy defensive tackles just don't have that much of a premium anymore. You don't have to snap them up early. Now, maybe if they're insane, like Kenneth Grant, okay, that's one thing. He was always going to go ahead of the Bills.
Man,
I think you're right.
I feel like this is a great Tyleek Williams team, but you're not taking him at 30, and he's not making it to 62.
Maybe you trade up in the 2nd round.
That's true.
The potential. We're extending the show another 3 hours.
Yeah, we've already been here 2.5 hours. We can go longer.
What about Ezeraku?
I like that.
Joey Bosa is not long
He doesn't
term.
factor into what you want to do long term. Yeah, and he does fit that kind of Bosa role, I think. Like what you're not really necessarily, but like
I see what you're seeing though.
You know what I mean? Like I think he could be good opposite of Greg Rousseau.
So I'm thinking Jaden Higgins, because I don't want to draft Walter Nolan to this team.
It doesn't really, what is he going to do that Ed Oliver doesn't already do?
Well, I think I took Walter
good at
Nolan to the
football.
Bills in my first mock draft of what I would do, and Bills fans were very prompt to inform me that we already have 3 of those guys.
It's just, yeah, that's true.
So some PTSD there. Oh, man, I think we make a point out of Ezeraku going in round 1.
Absolutely. He should. There's no way there's no way he doesn't. Not that there's no way he doesn't fall out. I have a hard time seeing him fall out of round 1.
Me too. And I don't have a hard time seeing James Pierce Jr. fall out of round 1.
Neither do I.
All right, that's the pick.
Makes a lot of sense.
We're on the final turn now, as you have the Chiefs, and then I have the Super Bowl champion Eagles.
All right. Chiefs, it's been tackle all cycle long. I think this is probably Josh Simmons.
So
Even if it's not necessarily the best scheme fit of all time, I think it's
remind me, is Josh Simmons a left tackle or a right tackle?
I don't left tackle.
I thought so. I don't know. Who's Ohio State's right tackle?
Donovan Jackson.
Yeah, they kicked Jackson out there midway through the year. And his tackle tape is actually surprisingly not bad. I still think he's a guard, though.
I think he can play. I think he gives Simmons a shot at right tackle. I know you just brought in Jalen Moore, but
For a decent chunk of change as well.
yeah, it's worth a shot. Simmons is a good technique guy, and he's a good athlete. I think all of that stuff will translate to the right side.
Oh, I think it will as well. I certainly think that he could play there. They're not, like, in hell at that position because, I think Jalen Moore is their starting left tackle. It's not – Juwan Taylor is starting at right, and he is not a quality starting offensive tackle. He's a guy that you can get by with. They really seem to like Josh Connerly and Ariante Ursery, I've noticed. I think Josh Simmons will go early than people expect just because his pass protection tape is so good. I've seen surprisingly little high-end interest in him from NFL teams. Don't get me wrong, he could still very much go here. However, this is my Omarion Hampton spot. The Chiefs do weird shit in the draft sometimes, like pretty consistently. Let me bring up their draft history. Who's their GM? I know he's quite long tenured.
Veach.
Yeah, yes.
I think he got there year after Mahomes was drafted, or the year Mahomes was drafted.
So about a 7 to 8 year sample size. Their draft history is Xavier Worthy, Kingsley Suamataia, I'll just do their 1 and 2 picks. Enaduke Uzama, Rashee Rice, and Wanye Morris. McDuffie, Karlaftis, Sky Moore, Brian Cook, Leo Chenal. Nick Bolton in the 2nd, and then Creed Humphrey later on. Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Willie Gay Jr. They'll take the blue-collar pick sometimes, but it feels like they have a little bit of a type. I know that Brett Veach really prioritizes young players as well, and he seems to guys who play with sort of a speed to power play style is what I'm observing. Like Miami drafts raw track speed. I like Omarion Hampton a lot, and I don't think it's insane because I do think that he goes in round 1, and I think that getting a high-end running back would do a lot to bolster the Chiefs all around because their running game was terrible last year. They were dead last in
Absolutely.
explosive play rate. I also had Nick Scorton circled. Now he's off the board. So the names that I have are Hampton and then Connerly, Simmons, and Nursery.
We'll say Wharton's gone. Nolan makes quite a bit of sense at the spot.
I didn't even think Nolan would still be here, so that's the only reason he's not on my board.
Yeah.
Because they like defensive line, they like athletic defensive line in particular.
I didn't think so either, but yeah, Nolan, Hampton, anybody you really want to go with here. I could see Chiefs going with anybody, but as your assistant GM, I'd say
No, this is
Nolan
your
or
pick.
Hampton.
This is your pick.
Oh, it's my pick. Oh, I forgot it's my pick. Okay. No, if this is my pick, I'm going to go Walter Nolan.
Okay, fair game.
I forgot this was my pick. Okay, no.
Playing devil's advocate for yourself.
Yeah, to play devil's advocate for what I'm about to do, I'm going to take the guy that people think should go in the teams. It's not an overdraft. No. They lost Wharton in free agency. They need a good pass rusher opposite on the other side of Chris Jones, and I think he's going to be really good at it. Hampton's a great pick. I just feel like they never go with the luxury offensive skill position pick because they have Patrick Mahomes, and I don't. Maybe that changes with the Super Bowl loss this year because Mahomes was let down. But again, I think this is a team that we'll see. Oh, there's plenty of guys we could draft in the second round, the third round at running back. Let's just do that and take a really good player in Walter Nolan that is still available. And this is where I like him a lot more. I don't love him in the teens, early 20s, 30s, 40s. 30s is really the sweet spot for me on Walter Nolan.
They took Elaire and Worthy with their first picks.
Well,
they're willing to do it. But no, don't get me wrong. I like Walter Nolan to this spot a lot, especially with Chris Jones, still an absolute stud. I mean, he has not lost a step, but he's not going to keep playing at this level forever. And the Chiefs got to eat their vegetables. They got to keep getting better. They can't rely on the star talent that they currently have deep into the future. We saw how that ended up with Travis Kelce.
They got to ask themselves, what would the Eagles do?
What would the Eagles do? And that's what I'm asking myself right now because with the 32nd pick, I've got Philly, and I didn't actually write down any names pre-draft. I just wrote BPA.
Yep.
I've picked James Pierce Jr. to them before. That in my what I would do mock draft because they're very good at molding defensive linemen, and James Pierce Jr. is very moldable. Is Josh Simmons insane? That's pretty insane. That's right. That feels very luxury, and obviously they're willing to go a little luxury, but I don't think he's like...
I don't think it is luxury.
I don't think he's a true one on teams' boards. This is very much his range, but I don't think it's like, oh, he's left.
I don't think it is luxury because ultimately Lane Johnson's, 34?
He's way up there. That sounds right to me.
You're with this pick, you're saying, Lane, you've done a lot of great things for us. But I think we both recognize maybe you're probably going to hang that up sometime in the next couple of years. That's what Philly does. They draft in advance. They drafted Milton Williams like 3 years ago, and it all came coming back when they needed him this year, and he helps them get to the Super Bowl. Same with Josh Sweat. Same with Cam Jurgens. They drafted in the second round 2 years before Kelce retired, and then he retired. They play him at guard the year before he retires. Then he retires. You slot him into center, and he looks great. This is just what they do. So it's not insane. I wouldn't say that it will happen. I won't veto it. Is what I'm saying.
Is Emeka Egbuka here insane?
Oh, they listen. Jahan Dotson had a good run, but they still need to slot. And I could see them doing that as well. Just build this offense into even more of a juggernaut. Let Smitty go back to the outside. It's just like everything's luxury pick because this is such a great roster. You got to remember that.
Pretty much. When you look at Howie's tendencies, he doesn't really have any.
No.
Prioritize, well, BPA and right smack in the middle of athleticism like you would expect, right smack in the middle of age as you would expect. Do you happen to know anything about their football character drafting? They drafted Jalen Carter. Yeah, I think the fact that they were so willing to draft Jalen Carter. They're not worried.
They know that especially with Fangio sticking around another year, if there's anybody if I'm dealing with a problem child in the locker room, in the defensive locker room, Vic Fangio's a guy I feel pretty confident he's going to fuck are you doing? Get up and rush the passer. What are you talking about? You don't get. He's gonna get them. He's gonna get his ducks in a row. He's not gonna fuck around. I think character's not really an issue, especially if you're drafting defensively.
With the last pick, the 32nd pick, the roughly 2.5 hours pick in the Balls Talk Sports Predictive Mock 1.0, will you veto James Pierce Jr. to the Philadelphia Eagles?
No, it's a very Howie pick. It's an Eagles pick. I think it's probably what they do if this is here. And everybody's been like, how did they get it? Steal the draft.
Top remaining on PFF's big board. The top remaining on my big board as well, because I'm not a big James Pierce Jr. guy, but I'm not a hater either. I recognize the upside. Trigger pulled. We're through.
Wow. The first predictive mock draft is done, and I like that pick just because, again, if there's a culture that I want Pierce to go to, it would probably be Philly, and they could use another edge there, especially after Sweat's departure to Arizona. And he fits the mold of what they want to do there. He can just play pure outside linebacker. Fangio could drop him into coverage occasionally because he's a really great spot dropper. It's a fun pick.
All right. And that was the full first-round mock. We've given all of the BTS listeners a preview of what they're going to get in April. I don't even think that you need to watch the draft now because it's like you have the scoop ahead of time.
We just told you what's going to happen.
To be perfectly honest, I don't think this is going to age bad. We have a good idea of the general range of these prospects. Don't get me wrong. There are guys we have maybe at 25-ish that could fall to the second. But for the most part, I know it's like a top 50 grade heavy class. And maybe Jaden Higgins goes round 1. I think Omarion Hampton probably goes round 1. There are guys who we didn't draft in the first round who I think will go. But I think we're on the right track. A lot of the dominoes have fallen. I think this is the right gist. And I don't think that there's too much movement between now and the third week in April.
Yeah, I think this is going to age horribly, but I think, you know what, we always talk about adjusting, regression to the mean. When you're talking about mean adjusted aging, I think we're going to be great. Everybody's mock is going to age horribly. Ours is going to age better.
I think that we got almost every pick right.
Well,
so
yeah,
we're in different
of course
places.
we did. We got every pick right.
Aging horribly for us is 3+ picks incorrect.
It's just like whenever I said that somebody's gonna race it to the stand, well, it turns out they take it down to the wire.
It's more of a jog.
Yeah, exactly. We didn't get every detail exactly right. Omar Khan, he did call Brandon Beane. He didn't hang up the phone like that. He said a couple more curse words. But since we're obviously a very family friendly podcast, as you can tell from the everything about us.
Correct.
we didn't think that those expletives were necessary for y'all to hear. So,
ladies and gentlemen, as always, stay family friendly and stay hard.